Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching fourth and final part of What If Kid Naruto was trained by a forgotten abyss demon. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
It was a lovely day. The village appeared to be in good condition, with the damage gradually being fixed. It appeared that Suna and Otto suffered the greatest losses among their forces. They feared Naruto rightfully when he said he was no longer fully human, but they also loved him more than ever. A few became even more terrified when Konohamaru and some of the younger kids started dressing more in black and visiting the library to learn more about Naruto's awesome shadow powers. Specifically, Naruto would be more afraid than ever on this day. Team 7, now fully recovered, stared in horror at the scroll that Sarutobi had just given Naruto to read aloud. The old man had already chosen his successor, so for once he was not dressed in the Hokage robes. A scroll that might as well have been written by Shinigami. Sama was in Naruto's hands. It said he had 10 seconds to live. He read aloud for 2 seconds before realizing what he had done. Tora, murmured Sasuke beside him, not having felt quite so afraid since the day he discovered his clan had been murdered. That thing had. Naruto murmured a little louder, his voice trembling slightly, as if he were about to cry. Shishi noticed that even Akio had a few tears in her eyes. He's heard about the demon cat, but that's about all the information he has. Sakura broke half of the building's windows and used her powerful lungs to break the terrible news to the people of Konoha. Tora had kittens. You could feel how the 12 baby demons, each with a unique color and size, were scratching the poor Genin's faces for the next 100 months. Hope to see you soon, Gaia-chan. Holding a small red kitten away from his face, Naruto said. Strangely enough, Tora's kitten in question was always looking for Naruto and attempting to fight him. With a hint of red on her usually pale cheeks, Gaia nodded. With a smile on his face and a forward lean, Naruto kissed Gaia passionately for a considerable amount of time, her eyes seemingly about to burst. She shivered with anticipation as he whispered into her ear, "You'll get more when we see each other again." Glazing her eyes, she muttered, "Oh. Okay, Naruto-kun." With a sly smile, Naruto reached for her butt, causing the Tsunakunoichi to squeak. In a hushed whisper, "I'll visit whenever I can." Gaia was aware of his abyssal transport, which allowed him to manifest anywhere. In addition, as long as he knew where he was going, he could teleport anywhere. Or the person he sought. Subsequently, Kankuro dragged Naruto to one side and started uttering threats that would have anyone shaking with fear. Given the stark disparity in strength, Naruto knew Kankuro was incapable of achieving any of those feats. Nevertheless, Naruto continued to get shivers down his spine. Naruto gave a rather high, "Understood," as they nodded to one another, and they soon found themselves chatting away like old friends. Naruto twitched an eyebrow and asked, "You want me to do what now?" It was bad enough that he had to battle the cat hiss. Today. They gave him that name because he would always hiss at people instead of purring or meowing. He mostly hissed at Naruto, or at least made a sound that was clearly meant to be a hiss. "Nasuto. You must bring Senju Tsunade, my other pupil, back so she can serve as the Godem Hokage. Jiraiya will be going with you," the elderly man said again. Even before Sarutobi's lips could have released the G in Jiraiya, Naruto was already yelling, "Fuck no. Why the hell does it have to be that stupid pervert?" "Because he still has to teach you your father's Rasengan," Sarutobi replied. "Where's that stupid idiot anyway?" It was practically an order from Naruto, raising an eyebrow in the process. A voice called out from the window said, "Right here," just before Naruto slammed his fist into the sage's face. "You're running behind schedule. So, tell me about the Rasengan that you owe me." Crossing his arms, Naruto spoke. If Jiraiya had been a regular civilian, the glare Naruto gave him would have caused him to urinate and pass out. "Oh. Okay," the elderly recluse exclaimed, giving a quick nod of his head that lessened Naruto's scowl. "So, I'm ready when you are." Then he turned to face Sarutobi, whispering, "Fine. But I want to bring someone else with me." He created a clone, which he sent to bring a particular person. Jiraiya nearly had a heart attack when the clone materialized with someone just 3 minutes later. He practically squeaked, "H.her," when he spotted a head with red hair that he knew. Yes, her. Deadpan Naruto made fun of himself. Tayuya was grinning and cracking her knuckles while Jiraiya was whimpering pitifully. She scared the living daylights out of Jiraiya with her angelic voice. "Thanks for bringing me along, Naruto. Sama. Well, I need assistance from someone to discipline this moron. Is there anyone else more suitable than you?" She nodded and said, Okay, I'll do it," before casting a wicked grin on poor Jiraiya. "Okay. Meet me at the gate in an hour." After that, he hurried off to spend the remainder of his time snooping as much as he could. An hour later, Tayuya and Naruto were still waiting for the old fool. With Tayuya nodding next to him, Naruto complained, "He has 10 seconds before I hunt him down." 5 seconds. Jiraiya appeared instantly, grinning widely. When he noticed the demonized glare Naruto gave him, the smile quickly turned into fear. "Come here sooner the next time. Sincerely, I don't want to spend any more time than necessary searching for your girl." The three set out for the last location where Tsunade was last seen, with Jiraiya saying, "Right then, let's get going." They were unaware that 3 individuals on a white bird were traveling to the same location to meet Naruto. As Tayuya kicked Jiraiya forcefully in the ribs, he exclaimed, "Wake up, fucktard." He was already in pain from the 2 brats after just 2 days of travel. Soon after, Naruto started kicking as well, which caused Jiraiya to finally lose it. He complained angrily, "It's 4 in the morning." It caused Naruto to flinch. "Oh, I mean, I usually get less sleep than I should. Tell me, please, what the next step in the Rasengan is. Will you arrow Senin?" Naruto had finished the first step and was prepared for the second during the course of the 2 days. Honestly, Naruto's desire to locate Tsunade as soon as possible kept them from getting much sleep yesterday. Tayuya was only not complaining because Naruto picked her up and allowed her to rest without pausing for even a moment when it appeared that she would collapse. Nevertheless, Jiraiya mentioned that he was tired, and Naruto pulled Jiraiya along, nearly dislocating his arm twice, by extending a foxtail from his spine and wrapping it around Jiraiya's arm. "All right, then." Jiraiya muttered, "There are rubber balls in my pack, so try to pop those with your chakra," in the vain hope that Naruto would grant him more sleep. Naruto gave a tense laugh, realizing that this was not meant to be. "I was not supposed to pop those yet, is that right? It's too late for that, huh? When I ran out of balloons, I did those. Well, then, what's the third step?" Naruto sheepishly scratched the back of his head. Jiraiya let out a sigh and stood up, instructing Naruto on how to create the Rasengan without shattering the balloon. Then, while Jiraiya and Tayuya were packing up their makeshift camp, Naruto started working on that. They soon discovered Tanzaku Town, which appeared to be a rather pleasant town. The fact that it was morning did not bother Naruto in the slightest. He smiled. He looked up to see Tayuya and Jiraiya both had their heads turned slightly. Tayuya, though, was surveying the area. Jiraiya had just discovered an inn and gone in when a random woman winked at her. When Naruto awoke the next morning, Jiraiya had simply slammed their room key into his palm and fled, leaving a trail of dust behind him. Not really caring, Naruto muttered, "That was to be expected." The woman's eyes seemed glassy, and he suddenly realized that meant. With a sly smile on his face, he peered over the roof of the building opposite his own and saw 3 people jump off a bird. 1 woman and 2 men. "Tayuya Chan, please come," he said, "we have guests," and Tayuya followed him into the room. With a cheerful smile, she replied, "Yes, Naruto Sama." She didn't need to swear more than 17 times a day because she loved the way she was treated in his home. And that really meant losing the twins by only a few hundred ryo. The bird vanished in a puff of smoke, and the girl mumbled, pouting, "I wanted to show more of my art, Later on, we'll have more time. Let's head to see Naruto-kun now," says Itachi, who made sure to put on a disguise before leaping off the roof and landing outside the inn. After successfully dusting off his pants, the third member realized he was alone. He felt a sudden panic. "Itachi. Senpai. Didera. Senpai. Where are you?" The female member abruptly grabbed him by the back of his hair and pulled. "Cease talking already. She snarled as the unfortunate man started to cry. "Say. Senpai. You're hurting." "I don't care," she growled, forcing the boy to stop sobbing. At least for the time being. Itachi let out a sigh and carried on. If someone had noticed them while they were disguised, they would have seen a husband and wife, with the woman pulling on their child's ear. He removed his disguise and knocked on the door he knew Naruto was in. He waited and heard some shuffling. Naruto complained to himself that Anbu captains were the same way. You know, the whole making Jiraiya go after the chick thing was rather unnecessary, he muttered as he opened the door. I wanted to give him an explanation of everything. Itachi simply shrugged, his sly smile tucked away under his coat collar. I found it kind of funny. I'm sorry, but anyone would go crazy at the idea of pulling a Sannin. Itachi stated. Naruto simply shrugged, although many would find it odd that he spoke in his usual stoic tone. So who are? He said, only to have an orange and black blur suddenly tackle him and encircle his abdomen. Hey there, it's nice to finally meet you, Toby, stated a rather gregarious-looking young man who was likely 4 years Naruto's senior. He wore the typical Akatsuki outfit, had black spiky hair, and an orange spiral mask covering his face. Hello, this is Toby, Naruto.kun. And Deidara is behind me. After saying that, Itachi jerked a thumb behind him. Indeed, a person who reminded him of Ino and had blonde hair approached him and gave him a peace sign. So you're the kid from Uzumaki, huh? She smirked and said. The voice finally convinced him that it was a female. After giving her a nod, Naruto turned back to face the smiling man in the mask. He asked, where can I get a mask like that? Figuring he'd look good wearing one of those. Orange might not have been his obsession, but it was still his favorite color. He could see a child's twinkling, shiny blue eye even through the mask. In partnership with Jiraiya, as he ran back towards the inn, he chanted, crap, 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 crap. The hottie fainted as soon as he got to her and didn't wake up for almost 10 minutes. When she did wake up at last, she said something incoherent about a man with red eyes and 3 tomo spinning around them because she was afraid. After telling her to go home and rest, which she did gladly, he then started to get agitated and hurried back to the inn, hoping that Naruto had not been taken. Using hand signals and biting his thumb, he stormed into the room. It was only after he had begun to summon a toad that he realized what was going on. And that's when he passed out, seeing images of Itachi pondering a pair of contacts in his hands, Deidara and Tayuya comparing the arts of music and sight, and Naruto and Toby playing cards. Itachi muttered, I still don't understand why I have to wear these, as he looked down at his hand's contacts. As I mentioned, it improves your vision. Or would you prefer that I get you some thick lensed glasses? Itachi shook his head quickly, not wanting to use one of those enormous devices. After settling that, Naruto crossed his legs and sat in front of Toby, who was distributing cards to the 2 clones he had created. He mumbled as he sat down, all right, Toby. I'm assuming you're familiar with poker because I don't feel like explaining. Is it like Go Fish? The idea of having to teach it to Toby when all he wanted to do was play made Naruto's eye twitch. Being the nice guy that he is, he responded, yeah, except you say royal flush or something else. Deidara and Tayuya shook their heads and laughed, then resumed their conversation. And after Jiraiya crashed through the door almost 10 seconds later, she froze, stared for a good 5 seconds, and eventually passed out. Each of them gave him a quick blink before shrugging and going back to what they were doing. In a cave that is dark, in front of a statue, a man's projection was visible. The statue's hands were bound, giving it the appearance of a 9-eyed, petrified zombie. He called out to the nin that had gathered around him, where are they? The only one who wasn't a projection said, don't know. He had a big, bandaged sword on his back and looked like something Orochimaru would create by fusing human and shark DNA. When I last saw Itachi-san, Toby, and Deidara-san, they were having a conversation. They appeared rushed, but I'm not sure where they went. The leader glared as his projection vanished. Whatever the reason is, find them immediately. Payne turned to the man standing behind him and sighed in a tower. I don't know what they are doing, but I know that they are no longer with us. Even though Itachi and Deidara were helpful, Toby can definitely grow. Other than being a little bit faster than average, the fool never really accomplished anything. However, his mind was practically mush, so I could act just like him. I'm growing bored with doing very little, a voice with 2 Sharingan. Shining eyes murmured. Payne gave a nod and departed the room, giving Madara some time to consider his next move. Oh no, my plans for Sasuke are ruined without Itachi. His hatred of his older brother will still be useful to me, though. Sasuke would always despise Itachi, regardless of what people say, he thought to himself as he smirked and put Toba's mask exactly on his own face. Returning with Naruto, Jiraiya yelled, "Someone explain what's going on," with an even greater sense of fear. The clay centipede Deidara had wrapped around his waist, Tayuya's flute in her hand, waiting to be rammed down his throat, Itachi and Toba's numerous kunai adorning his arms and legs, and Naruto's blades poised to be thrust into his stomach could all have played a part. All of them had smiles on their faces, but Itachi's eyebrow was raised in amusement. "Welcome back, Jiraiya," Naruto grinned and said. "Hey, Tobi is delighted to have met Jiraiya. Sama." Tobi cheerfully waved and gave the pinned Sannin a peace sign. Jiraiya gave the boy a nervous smile, unable to reply for fear of having a flute cut his neck. They released him, letting him crawl back into a corner and raise his hands in a pitiful attempt at defense before yelling, "Please don't kill me. I always believed that the day I had the audacity to approach Tsunade, she would kill me." A few eyebrows were raised by that, and two irate kunoichi flooded the room, demanding to speak with Ki. Given that Tsunade was the strongest kunoichi among the elemental nations, she was a woman to be respected, after all. Naruto grumbled, rolling his eyes, and walked out the door, the two other men following him. "You're an embarrassment to humans, Jiraiya. I hope you survive." "Well, that was a lie. Whether you lived or not didn't matter to me." Tobi eventually shut the door after Naruto returned the call. After a brief period of confusion and the sound of cracking knuckles, Jiraiya was in excruciating pain. Every time Jiraiya let out a shriek or there was a sound of snapping, the three men outside winced. Or rather, it sounded like someone tearing apart his organs. Naruto came to the conclusion that he actually felt some sympathy and care for the destitute man. In part. He screamed, "My GNADS," and they cringed, hoping that the poor man would experience the wonderful embrace of death. After 3 more minutes, Tayuya appeared to be carrying a crate full of chocolates, and Deidara returned with a wild smile on all 3 of her mouths. Naruto discovered fast that she preferred that food, as the majority of items in his refrigerator were nearly always devoid of chocolate. "More favorable," Deidara chirped, holding her hands behind her back. "Shall we go now?" The 2 women let the men peek inside the room as they strolled down the hallway. Naruto. "Aniki, huh? Itachi. Senpai?" Tobi, observing the 2 older men, inquired. They both kept staring and only gave a small grunt to indicate they were paying attention. "What's smoking that black object? And why does this place smell like burnt meat?" Itachi started to say that, Tobi, but Naruto interrupted. The Jinchuriki entered the room, his face devoid of all emotion save sympathy, and mumbled, "Is what happens to foolish perverts like Jiraiya." Even though he lacked medical jutsu proficiency, his Yuki just understood his intentions and followed instructions. That also meant he needed to focus like crazy. He had to put his intention into the Yuki alone if he wished to heal something. One of 2 things would occur if he didn't. First, because the Yuki destroyed some brain cells and replaced them with pure Yuki, it would only cause hyperactivity and mania in the person. The other was that it would be poisonous or acidic enough to kill them. Yes, whenever he killed some villagers, that's how the bodies were always disposed of. Yes, he did indeed love his village. On the residents, however, he said nothing at all. He moved both of the Sannin's arms as he carefully restored his health, and straightened the leg once more. Also, confirmed that the fingers were not twisted. And turned the jaw back. And to think that he had to fix the entire body. "Jiraiya, I honestly believe you will die in the most comical way possible." Itachi shook his head and spoke. After finishing his task, Naruto got up and left the room. Then Itachi gave him a quick pat on the shoulder and walked away, leaving Tobi to turn to face the man. Tobi merely stood there, sympathizing with the man with his one open eye. "How is Jiraiya Sama doing? Is he interested in going to a hot spring with Tobi?" Since Naruto had informed him that the Toad Hermit enjoyed visiting hot springs for his research, he asked naively. Already warming to the boy, Jiraiya nodded and smiled. Regretfully, he failed to notice the playful twinkle in Toba's eye. Namikaze Estate, Konoha in Naruto's house, something kind of interesting is going on. Specifically, his room. Are you sure of this, Akio-san? Hinata, with a blush that hung just below her neck, asked, her face nearly glowing. Next to her, equally red, was Haku. Mostly because Akio was using strips of shadow to take measurements right now and they were both fully nude. "Yes, without a doubt. You two will look fantastic, so don't worry. Besides, orange is still Naruto." Kun's favorite color even though he doesn't wear it. So how about we just sew you two some outfits so that there's no way he could resist? Chirped Akio, placing the measurement against Hinata's chest and giving her a gentle squeeze on the breast. Beyond the door, before starting to joke around with the girls, Akio overlooked a small matter. Well, a couple of small things. Hearing the two girls moan, Nell and Shippo cocked their heads to the side. They momentarily became perplexed. Prior to their terrible realization, Nell gasped, "Why? You don't think?" But Shippo just nodded and appeared terrified. Yes. His little knees quivering as he heard the cries of Payne, he whispered, Akio. Nay. Sama is gonna eat Hina. Chan and the Hawk-Up lady. They fled swiftly, looked around the house, and eventually located the person they were searching for, Stitch. The little blue stopped consuming the orange juice that Kin had given him in the bottle. Despite having strong teeth, he seemed to enjoy using the bottle for some reason. He called, indicating he was paying attention. Shippo exclaimed, "Cha agg," as he and Nell hurled themselves toward Naruto's room while holding Stitch above their heads. They charged full speed towards the door, slamming his head in, using the blue summon as a battering ram. They added some Yuki to the run, so the door gave in right away. The most they could have done, given their youth, was to unhinge the door and then slam into it, which caused the door to fall. Hinata, Haku, and Akio were all under the sheets, as Shippo, Nell, and Stitch could all see. "Oh." With innocence, Shippo said, "They weren't being eaten." The two humans blushed because they felt like they were being eaten by a very attractive fox girl who was skilled with her hands, mouth, and tail. Unfortunately, Stitch had a nosebleed the moment he realized what was going on because he was old enough to understand. The three short organisms were blasted backwards and out of the room, all the way down the hall, down the stairs, and into the living room in a crumpled heap while the twins held on to him. Akio shrugged and blinked, then grinned back at the girls. Hinata questioned nervously, Did this kill the mood?" Akio shook her head, and Hinata mumbled something like, "Darn," before Akio went on. The speed at which his eye was twitching gave Naruto the impression that it was nothing more than a blur. Toby was now singing a line from The Wizard of Oz, on top of the fact that they had to travel to a different town in order to locate Tsunade. He had been playing the same song over and over, for a duration of 3 hours. He was not alone, though, because Deidara kept making bombs and putting them away, one for every time Toby had sung that same song. Nonetheless, he was forced to at least yield to the young man. If he hadn't known any different, he would have assumed they were likely cousins. Toby proved he was a natural at playing practical jokes on the final town. Funny what you can do with 100 shadow clones dressed as civilians, 3 bottles of pink dye, and red feathers. And as a group of Deidara's birds scattered feathers throughout the town, the clones burst into a massive pink dye mushroom. "We're heading to the wizard's house. The amazing Wizard of Oz," Toby said once more. "Toby, good boys are quiet when the rest are trying to find a person." Looks like Itachi muttered just as Naruto was about to swing his blades. He had nothing against Toby, but there was only so much of the same old song one could listen to. Toby quit singing and joyfully skipped along as soon as he heard that. Naruto turned to face Itachi, growling, "You're a bad man. You could have mentioned that sooner," he remarked, observing the amusement in the Uchiha's gaze. Uchiha are peculiar animals. Every single one of them. In the end, they chose to just go ahead and order a drink. Naruto was an adult in legal terms. So before he killed someone, he had to get his ass drunk. Furthermore, if he did kill someone while intoxicated, at least his fantastic justification will make it all seem harmless. Perhaps. When they walked into a nearby bar, Jiraiya exclaimed, "Tsunade." "Hime," with a happy expression that nearly immediately filled his eyes. A stunning woman with enormous breasts, dressed in a sort of gray robe, blue jeans, and high-heeled sandals, raised her gaze from the cup she was holding. "Jiraiya? How on earth did you end up here?" she yelled in disbelief, her alcohol-induced blushes slightly pink. Despite his urge, Naruto refrained from going to Sarutobi's office and giving him a slap across the face. Wasn't this meant to be the next Hokage? This inebriated woman who seems to have been escaping her history? Really? His lips trailed off to a whisper, "So this is Tsunade." She didn't appear to be much, but she still seemed poised to strike. When he turned to look behind him, He saw that Tayuya and Jiraiya were the only people following him. He approached the table and took a seat in front of Tsunade, with Tayuya occupying the space next to him as Jiraiya brought up a chair. He grinned warmly and said, "Nice to meet you," primarily because he was relieved that he no longer needed to search for her. Jiraiya said, "Okay then, I have something to tell you, Tsunade." As Naruto and Tayuya started speaking with Shizune, they both started talking about how Konoha wanted her to take on the role of the new Hokage. "I'm not going to go back to that village." Tsunade let out a growl, reminding Naruto of their purpose for being here. "So can we go now?" Tsunade was also drawn to Naruto's question to Jiraiya. She appeared to be so inebriated that she hadn't noticed Naruto until recently. "And Jiraiya, who the devil are these brats? Were they adopted by you or something?" "Hey, hello. Naruto is his name, and before I allowed myself to be adopted by this pervert, I would sooner stab my own eyes and ears." Once more, Naruto greeted with an entirely composed tone. That demonstrated his seriousness enough. Just as Tsunade was about to raise an eyebrow, the name suddenly made sense. "Naruto? As in, Naruto by Kushina Chan?" Glancing at him as if he were a ghost, she asked. She jumped up out of nowhere, grabbed Naruto, and gave him the biggest, strongest hug imaginable. Did he just crack 2 different places on his spine? He heard her cry, "Naruto," and even felt tears land on his head. He choked out, his face pressed against her chest, "Yeah, it's me." Jiraiya looked at him, betrayed as much as envious. They had no idea that Itachi was staring at him with something similar. Tobi simply believed that Naruto was dozing off in the woman pillows. Deidara had always called them that anyhow. He thought it odd that the blonde bomber had none. Deidara felt an overwhelming urge to murder everyone who possessed even the slightest hint of orange color. Tsunade exclaimed, "Oh dear God, Naruto," with an expression that suggested she was attempting to crush him. "I believed you to be deceased. The hospital in which you were born was in ruins, and your mother's body was hardly whole." She hiccuped more and sobbed into the blonde boy, saying, "And you were nowhere to be found." He simply stood there, his eyes softening and then widening a little. All right, so she believed he was dead. He was able to pardon her. To a certain extent. Thankfully, she didn't do anything to provoke him. Jiraiya for being aware of his existence and for being a pervert. "Tsunade, it's all right. You were unaware," he reassuringly remarked. He did, however, know this guy however, jerking a thumb towards a nervously perspiring Jiraiya. 3 girls were directing all of their ki toward the lone Sannin almost immediately, since he was feeling a lot more relieved. He was fairly certain that he had just pissed himself. Tsunade snarled, raising both of her fists and saying, "You die." Jiraiya was letting out the most girlish screams ever heard for the remainder of the night. Now, the lone pig and the 7 ninjas were by a river, with Naruto dousing him in water to maintain his focus. His focus has been lacking lately. Rubbing his temples, Naruto muttered, "So let me get this straight." As he considered what he had just heard. "Orochimaru offered to bring back your lover and your brother, correct?" said he. For now, he was sporting a couple of bruises that were taking time to heal. As they were leaving the bar, Tsunade, who thought Itachi was an enemy, made an appearance and almost gave him a hard time. He thus had to give her and everyone else an explanation of everything. See, Itachi was left with very little option. Every member of the Uchiha clan planned to stage a coup and remove Gigi. Sasuke kind of went insane, so he had to kill everyone and leave. Naruto started to elaborate. After that, he entered Akatsuki, ran into Deidara there, Tobi went with him, and Sarutobi. Gigi and I worked out a plan for him to return home. It will mess with Sasuke's head in addition to giving Konoha some power back. With a straight face, Naruto said. At the mention of Sasuke getting screwed up, Itachi twitched but remained silent. For that, he would get Naruto back. Tsunade mumbled, "Okay, but I still don't trust him." All Itachi did was shrug. He was feeling pretty smug about tricking a Sannin once, to be honest. Though it might sound silly, he didn't really need to reveal which Sannin he fooled, did he? When Deidara saw her friend in all of his Uchiha glory, she rolled her eyes. Tobi was afraid, primarily because he had just seen Tsunade act violently. Nearly as much as Deidara does when Kisame claims to be PM singing. They had to leave 5 different lairs because of her rage. They made it work, despite the hassle. Anyway, I don't think Orochimaru will voluntarily revive Dan and Nawaki. Did he request a gift? Tsunade sighed and ran a hand through his hair when he reluctantly nodded. It seems likely to me that he will employ impure world resurrection. Their souls will be safe, but they won't have much, if any, self-control. You will only receive emotionless copies of them from Orochimaru. Naruto spoke while expressing annoyance in his eyes. Tsunade sighed, appearing to lose her mind. That is, even more than she was before. So, was that a lie? Now, what should I do? With a tired sigh, she questioned. Too many things to do and choices to make. Naruto suddenly extended a hand to greet her. You can begin by realizing Dan's and Nawaki's dreams. Take on the role of Hokage and support their aspirations. He nodded at her as he spoke. A grin appeared as she hesitated, nodded, and took Naruto's hand. What do you say, Ba-chan? Probably a bad idea to say that, because he got hit in the face with a punch and flew into a rock face. Naruto groaned and twitched as the poor thing was reduced to rubble. Don't say that, you brat. Actually, the remainder of the week was pretty interesting. Naruto shared a lot of information with Tsunade about his upbringing and treatment. Tell them that Tsunade unleashed so much rage on the landscape that many boulders would have funerals. Nervously, Naruto laughed, but mostly to cover up the feeling that he was about to fight. He said gladly that Tsunade could vent her resentment on him since he needed a formidable opponent. What was the outcome? Well, a lot of explosions in the middle of the night woke people up. And a whole mountain vanished the following day. With the tattered remnants of Orochimaru's hands nearly reaching it, Tsunade now stood in front of him, her hands glowing a blue color. And as they approached by only a few centimeters, Tsunade's chakra was cancelled by the tossing of a scalpel. Not exactly sounding surprised, Orochimaru asked, Are you betraying me, Tsunade-chan? Tsunade gave him a sly smile that he knew wasn't hers. Nope. Simply arrived to slay you, she exclaimed in a boy's voice, transforming into a black mist and then constricting into a single Uzumaki Naruto. Shall we have our fun now, Orochi-teme? Shishi stood in front of the council, sighing and crossing his arms. Let me clarify this now. You want me to move to Konohagakure permanently, join the CRA, and get promoted to Jonin, is that right? The demon inquired, laughing inwardly at how foolish the humans were. He never really imagined that influencing people to do as he pleases would be so simple. It was simple to control people. They were nothing more than living puppets. Do some good here, some bad behind their backs. He noticed the heads of the council members nodding, so he knew he could finally have some fun. This should be fascinating. He accepted, chuckling lightly, let the games begin. Orochimaru's expression was one of annoyance as Naruto kept his grin on his face. If this kid could really keep up with the demon that tore off his arms, then he could do some serious damage. The demon, however, was yelling a lot of odd things, primarily about calling Orochimaru a reptile. However, the demon's remarks or cries regarding the two blondes' fights provided enough clues. With his arms gone, he was pretty much screwed. Still, he tried to act casual. Trying to remain composed, he asked, Where is Tsunade? Hime. However, if your ears are as good as an Inuzuka's, you could easily pick up on the snake's slight discomfort when it asked. Oh, she's around. Somewhere. Naruto recalled doping their drinks, a drop of sweat forming over his head. It was just that he wanted them to be safe, not because he didn't trust them. Who the hell was he kidding? He truly wanted to murder Orochimaru. He cherished a good fight, and he would gladly put his senior citizens to sleep in order to have one. That's kind of what happens when you have an abscess Yuki running through you, though it might seem crazy to most people. Shishi hinted that it was possible that a lard or some other guy was his ancestor. Alkarth? Whatever. The idea was that he had an innate desire to defeat any formidable foe he came across. I'm your opponent, so let's get this show on the road, he said with a cheeky smile. He then revealed his blades, threw Red Queen into the air, and gestured with his hands multiple times with one hand. He exhaled and said, Fire. Style. Great fire. Ball jutsu. Before directing a massive flame in the direction of the other two nin. Hey Kabuto. It seemed like Naruto saw the boy for the first time when he greeted him. Red Queen was finally brought down by gravity, and Naruto grabbed hold of it in reverse. With both blades in his crouch, he prepared to fight. Kabuto flinched at the sly smile Naruto bestowed upon him. Hello there, Naruto-kun. Kabuto remarked, I see you know a good deal of fire and wind jutsu. Despite knowing that the two would combine to be very effective. Even Naruto was aware of it. Yes. It's rather pleasant. I have the ability to cut and burn. Isn't that fantastic? Naruto questioned, his features going feral and his yuki flaring. Alright now. I wonder how long you two will put up a fight against me. With a sudden lunge, Naruto threw Kitsune in Kabuto's direction and sliced at Orochimaru. There was a tiny bit of shadow on the blade handle that stretched out and became a clone. Abyssal. Clone Jutsu. Murmuring, Naruto kept attacking Orochimaru. Meanwhile, the clone was attempting to paralyze Kabuto by slicing off his limbs. A medic, after all, is not very useful without his hands. With a scalpel, Kabuto cut the clone's neck, expecting it to fly away. Rather, as it gradually sealed the wound, it merely released a black smoke. With a sly smile on its face, the clone persisted in its attack and succeeded in making a small scratch on Kabuto's shoulder. Unknown location. With a slight sneer on his face, a man in his mid-20s, pale and with silver hair, was walking silently through a forest. I still find it hard to believe I wasn't selected as the Kyuubi. Even though the council doesn't want me to be the leader of the Fox Demons, I have always been stronger than Hikari. Foolish idiots. The man asked himself, how can they say that there is someone much stronger out there? He had on metal wrist guards, leather boots, fingerless gloves, and white robes with a red sash around his waist. In case you're unable to discern, those are Altair's robes from Assassin's Creed. With the exception of his hood being down, none of the weapons or their sheaths are on him. His hands turned into razor sharp claws as he started chopping through the trees, filled with rage. His 7 white tails lash out in a ferocious roar before being tipped in ice. With a growl, he unlocked a door to the human realm. Being a Kyuubi could only happen once, and that was in the human world. Naruto. The abyssal clone smirked as he saw Kabuto and Orochimaru perched atop a massive purple snake, returning his blade and fusing with Naruto's shadow. Interesting, he thought as he observed the snake and attempted to predict when it would strike. My guess is that you are Manda, the boss to the snake. Contract. Looking rather amused, Naruto murmured. When he noticed Manda's eyes twitch slightly upon seeing Naruto, he grinned. Naruto Uzumaki. Namikaze. The world's only known abyssal. Hanyu. I assumed that once the damned Nosferatu vanished, they were all gone. Declared Manda, appearing quite uneasy facing a Count's descendant. He was one of many monsters from the past, even among demons, just like many other creatures. Well, I guess I'm descended from a well-known person. How lovely, truly sounding proud, Naruto mused aloud. Then, as he sealed Red Queen away, he shrugged. He mumbled, holding Kitsune in both hands, I might as well put this away since I don't plan on sealing anything anytime soon. The big snake slithered away as he teleported above it and then stabbed downward. A large knife stabbed the ground the snake's head was on, forcing it to veer away just as it was ready to swallow him whole. Oh no. A loud voice said, I was hoping to get a wallet made of snakeskin. Glancing over, Naruto noticed a big toad with red markings surrounding its eyes, mouth, and body. It had bandages around its abdomen, a purple robe on, the kanji for chief, in a red circle on its back, and a pipe in its mouth that emitted smoke to indicate that it was in use. Naruto glanced up at the top of Jiraiya's head and saw his irritated expression. There was a large, mostly white slug with a blue tint on its back next to the toad. Tayuya, Shizune, and Tsunade were perched atop its head. Yes, and Tun too. You ignorant brat. You realize how anxious I and the others were? He yelled at the blonde who was laughing. Jiraiya turned back to face Orochimaru, complaining, I'd try smacking you upside the head, but I don't want to loose my hand. And you? Do you know how suicidal it is for someone to fight this child on purpose? He's eliminated so many groups of criminals while we were searching for Tsunade that I'm having trouble falling asleep at night. Orochimaru appeared extremely irritated. Jiraiya. How awkward it is to see you once more. I understand your feelings. You continue to look gay. Naruto emerged on the big toad's pipe, and the two men gave each other a childlike glare. Hey, Naruto is his name. Gamabunta, you have to be. Arrow. Sennin would frequently make reference to my dad and you fighting together. Naruto said, giving a childlike wave. Nice to meet you. You are unquestionably Minato's child. Heck, that's how Minato also greeted me. He did, however, remark on my make up. Ah, what a dumb boy. I immediately destroyed him. A drop of perspiration appeared behind Naruto's head, and he was relieved that he remained silent. He almost asked, "What's with the make up?" but opted not to confront the two summons. He didn't want to kill both summons and didn't yet have complete control over his Yuki. Only Manda. Then he leapt over to Jiraiya and yelled, "We have to get rid of him right away. I shouldn't have allowed this to continue any longer than I have." He released his hold on Kitsune and allowed his Yuki to return to his body. Naruto muttered, a little impatient, "Come one already." When the flower in the middle of the three summons gradually lost all of its petals, the three summons launched an attack. Naruto had to admit, that was kind of neat. He stayed out of it for a while, being quite entertained. Shizune and Tayuya did a pretty good job of keeping Kabuto occupied as well. Kabuto staggered a little as Tayuya fluttered a few notes on her flute. Shizune was able to throw a few senbon with it, though some were blocked by Kabuto's scalpels. He merely blocked the deadly ones, which made him scream in agony even though they were meant to kill him instantly. Tayuya lunged forward, nearly stabbing him with her flute, but Kabuto stopped it with his scalpel and put some distance between the two women and himself. With Yuki's enhancement, Naruto made it function nearly like a kunai. She could only stab with it, but it was marginally stronger than iron. As a long-range fighter, she retreated swiftly from the attack's failure. The arrogant smile on Kabuto's face made her growl. "You know that it won't be long before Orochimaru Sama uses the cursor to kill you." Tayuya's turn to smugly grin came now. Kabuto, who was a little irritated, questioned, "Now what the hell is there to smile about?" "Oh, it's just that I was set free a very long time ago by Naruto Sama. I no longer have to worry about Orochi Teme troubling me in the future." She spoke as though she was remarking on the climate. Kabuto gave a slight twitch, but otherwise displayed no signs of irritation. "All right, then. I suppose I'll simply have to take your life myself." Someone behind him questioned, "But what about me?" Tsunade abruptly lifted him up by the back of his shirt and tossed him a few feet away. Just as Naruto's fist made contact with the snake's face, he awkwardly stood up and turned to face Orochimaru. It seemed like the child was growing restless. She cracked her knuckles and remarked, "Now I know he's gonna be someone that thousands of people will fear." Kabuto just grinned sardonically and played it cool. "So what are your thoughts?" His smile grew as he stabbed himself in the hand, "If it isn't the hematophobic medic." Tsunade flinched at the sight of the cut and was about to turn away when she noticed that the wound was leaking something, possibly broth. She grinned as soon as she realized the background music. "Genjutsu. Tayuya then put me in one to replace the blood with a foolish object." She grinned, thinking, "Smart girl," and saw Kabuto scowl and glance at his hand. He was bleeding profusely, so why wasn't she at all scared? Then he saw the girl with the red hair playing her flute and incorporating chakra into the music. It was only affecting Tsunade, whatever it was. Before he had to avoid the blow that would have destroyed his head, he had already gotten that far into his belief. Actually, Tsunade was relieved that she wouldn't have to worry as much about seeing blood. She leapt into the air, ready to deliver a mini-earthquake that would split the earth as soon as she hit it. With the chakra scalpels, Kabuto reached in to disable her leg, but Shizune materialized in between them, grabbing onto both of his wrists. The apprentice yelled, "Tsunade Sama, close your eyes." The Sannin complied, and the music ceased. Tayuya dashed towards Kabuto and succeeded in stabbing his left shoulder, which caused the jutsu to be cancelled. Kabuto clenched his teeth and started the process of healing himself, but the Yuki that was incorporated into the flute was impeding it. They didn't want to take a chance on her seeing the blood now that they had the genjutsu down. She pulled her flute from Kabuto's shoulder and proceeded to stab the other person. Regretfully, Manda was struck by Gamabunta's sword, piercing the upper part of his mouth, as he was thrown to the ground. From the top of the sword, Naruto yelled, "Take that, sucker." "Oh no. The next time you call forth Orochimaru, I anticipate hundreds of sacrifices. And I expect you to shut the fuck up." Naruto spoke slyly. He dispelled himself, leaving a trail of smoke, and Manda glared at him. Glancing around the smoke, Naruto let out a loud curse upon not seeing Orochimaru. "That Tsunuvabicha, damn him. Don't let Kabuto get away with it," he said, turning to face the three women who were glancing around. "Away. Fuck." There was a dark room in the Underworld, reserved for meetings. Shishi did his best not to yell during it. He did, in fact, asking the three demons in front of him, "What the fuck did you just say?" Before the Middle-earth fox repeated what she had said, the other two tensed slightly. Shishi. Sama, we want you to stay in the demon world and take on the role of Kyuubi. You have the strength and sword-playing ability to use them for the benefit of our fellow foxes. With one of her green eyes hidden behind a bang and her brown hair pulled back into a bun, she spoke. The other two, with their big, muscular frames, crew-cut brown hair, and green eyes, were most likely twins. The scars were the only thing that separated them. The person on the left could no longer use his left closed eye, as evidenced by the scar on it. The other guy's lower jaw was slightly burned. Each of the three wore jaggedly designed green robes, symbolizing an earthquake. He had to assume that all three were connected. I'm not considering it. I'm not exactly the most responsible guy around. I've started wars before. Besides, he said, his tone becoming serious as he met the woman's eyes. The gloom in his eyes made her wince. Everyone is aware that there is another contender for the throne. You are also aware that someone else has shown up at the appropriate location. But he's, indeed, mortal. But his power will increase even further when he transforms into Kyuubi. He's also already halfway to realizing his full potential. He will have to provide any further information, so don't expect me to be your pawn. Crossing his arms, he revealed the chain on his chest by opening his jacket. The intricate seals in each link that resembled the cage. Bird seal could be seen if one looked closely. Only when activated, it was supposed to cause excruciating pain and internal damage. Never to take a life. I bathed in the blood of my previous master when that happened once. Don't bother me any longer. The only thing that can defeat a Kyuubi is me, and I can dispatch of cowards like you with ease. He snarled, making the two men tense in case they had to flee. When this particular demon became enraged, the other creatures were all wise enough to flee. Thank you for your time, Shishi. Sama. She said that in a courteous manner before getting up and leaving the room. The other two quickly trailed behind her, casting on Shishi expressions that mixed praise and horror, if possible. For a brief while, Shishi sat there, twitching the chain around his waist. Stupids. They believe I'm going to help them, even though they have no idea the shit I've been through. My family has kept me sane and will do so until I pass away. Remembering the fear in their eyes, he smirked. They were fully aware of the consequences that would arise from hurting his clan. Nobody would fight. Never have any. Slumbering on the couch, Naruto let out a sigh. Tayuya hurried to the servants' quarters to share her adventure with Kin and Karen, while Itachi headed to the Hokage Tower to try and win back his job. Deidara trailed behind in case she was a Konoha shinobi. Toby just vanished. The guy literally vanished with a loud crack. When he finally made it back to his lovely house, Akio, Hikari, and the twins greeted him with embraces. It was genuinely endearing. He was taken to the table to eat after the embrace. Shishi entered the room during the meal, wearing a somewhat irritated expression as he opened the refrigerator, took a quick look around, pulled out some dango, and started munching. Even though it was still frozen, he didn't seem to mind. Perhaps because he was warming it with the yuki in his mouth. He didn't really give a damn if the yuki didn't. Though he was starting to cool down, a part of him was still furious that they had the audacity to request his crowning. Welcome Shishi. With a courteous nod, Hikari saw Shishi wave at her before plundering the refrigerator once more. Naruto asked, "Eat much?" As a piece of steak suddenly flew toward his head. Just before Shishi's hand shot out to take it back and shove it into his mouth, he managed to catch it. A knock on the front door came at that very moment. When Naruto opened it, a woman who looked to be in her 20s tackled him to the ground. Naruto had stood and moved toward it. "What's up, brat?" A happy and seductive voice that Naruto could hardly identify called out. Uncertain, he said, Anko? The woman on top of him giggled like a schoolgirl, and the hug seemed to get stronger. He said with a cool smile as he sank even further into her chest, "Yup, Anko. Anyway, where have you been? After removing my seal, you simply vanish and I haven't seen you. Don't you look sweaty?" She kissed him lightly on the cheek and purred. When he did manage to get a decent look at her, he observed that she appeared younger. Not significantly, perhaps a year or two, but it was noticeable nonetheless. Particularly after he observed that her chakra appeared to be much more lively. Hi, good to see you too, Anko. Naruto smiled and allowed Anko to fiddle with his hair. To be honest, he thought it felt good. When Anko heard the purring coming from behind Naruto's neck, she burst out laughing once more. She was thrilled that even though this guy was incredibly strong, she could still make him purr like a cat. Or a great beast of absolute devastation. Oh, Naruto, you think you like it? Her sultry words caused Naruto's face to flush a little as her aroma filled his nostrils. She had the scent of candy, forest, snakes, and just a hint of the natural scent of females. He thought it was actually kind of relaxing. That's when he realized that behind her was the other chakra signature. He turned his head slightly and saw Hinata standing behind Anko, blushing and restless. She was dressed differently than usual, with her black shirt visible through the open sweater and a black battle skirt with gray shorts underneath in place of her pants. If you may say so, rather cute and pretty. Hey Hinata. Hinata blushed profusely as Naruto expelled himself. Unbeknownst to her, he could sound so seductive. A chill ran up her spine, making her feel a little bit damp. But judging from his feral smile and split pupils, Naruto appeared to be able to smell her quite well. Oh, before we start getting all hot and sweaty, our new and dear Hokage Sama wants to see you in her office immediately. She leaned in close to his ear after saying that. And we'll be here waiting for you when you return. Well, prepared and tidy. Naruto's eyes gleamed with desire as his smile widened and almost split in two. He growled, licking her cheek with his slightly elongated tongue. You better be, hubby. Hime. Anko laughed, then got up from Naruto to let him stand and give Hinata a quick kiss before he quickly left. Go on, girl. We're going to treat our man very well. With a stutter, Hinata was hauled up the stairs by Anko as soon as she was seized. As Shishi started to disappear into the shadows, Akio simply arched an eyebrow. He was curious about the new Hokage's goals and whether or not she harbored any malice towards Naruto. Akio could sense her brother's dissatisfaction and realized she had no choice but to follow him. Tsunade and Sarutobi, the latter standing behind the current Hokage in gray robes and without a hat, were in front of Naruto. Sakura and Shishi, Shikamaru, Choji, Kiba and Akamaru, and Neji. A certain demon had to fight the urge to go 1000 IPM, insults per minute, when the world saw his balding head. It appears that Uchiha Sasuke vanished last night. It was Kiba who first realized that the Uchiha's scent led to the Konoha gates. It was also he who observed the guards who had been knocked out. Tsunade got going. Kiba, you're out of the top 10 people I'll kill. The Inuzuka heir laughed nervously as Naruto stammered. Until he noticed that Naruto was looking as serious as ever and wasn't laughing. All the jokes stopped right away. Way. I want all of you to go after him and bring him back at all costs. While everyone nodded, Naruto held up his hand. Yes? His tone was serious as he asked, you want him dead or alive? Please say that you are dead. Please say that you are dead. Alive. Now that I'm here, we still have to give him a trial, and it won't go well, she retorted icily. His fingers quirked a little as he muttered, understood. Fuick. Hell, damn it all. Dismissed. Tsunade spoke while utterly disregarding the key Naruto was aiming at the ground. In a few hours, the poor floorboard would be visible rotting away and would require replacement. At the gates now were all 6 members, Sakura inquiring as to the whereabouts of the guards. All they knew was that Sasuke's escape was made possible by the 4 who were still alive. But just as they were all about to depart, Akio and Shishi both showed up. What are the two of you doing? Sakura questioned, eyebrow raised. Need to kill. Shishi sighed and moaned, closing his eyes. To the 2 teenagers, he appeared troubled. All that said, Akio sighed, I'm just here to keep him under control. As much as I can, she added in her head. In all honesty, Shishi was constantly reserving things. He was way too busy, but he would have made the ideal Kyuubi. In addition, he disliked the job because it required leadership, and he was more of the instant follower type of guy. He would be regarded as the great Jubi's offspring if he were any stronger. Everyone was afraid of that alone, including Hikari in her Kyuubi days. All right. We're going to skin and resurrect Uchiha, according to that sequence. Shishi smiled as Naruto mumbled, but Kiba and Akamaru gave him a wary look. Sasuke was probably not going to have a happy ending to this. With their weapons ready, the group dove into the trees to find the betraying Uchiha. Sasuke was a little afraid when he realized he was covered in ice. His Sharingan revealed that these ice shards resembled those of the Momochi girl, even though he was immobile. These, however, had a distinct kind of chakra. He wasn't even positive that it was a chakra. It was more powerful and chilly. This energy seemed to belong to someone who he felt was not to be offended. He was able to look around and noticed that all three of the bodyguards were motionless as well, with the exception of the obese person, who was slain. Although he was able to avoid the ice, a man managed to stab him in the head with an ice shard. The man with the storm gray eyes had them all at his mercy now. He asked, crossing his arms and grinning teasingly at Sasuke, "Sasuke Uchiha, correct? Then, those are the Sharingan." The amused smile on his lips that began to annoy Sasuke was the eyes that can see the future and copy these jutsu you humans have. His two tomo started to spin, and he growled, "Release me," in an attempt to at least control the man. The man uncrossed his arms and grimaced visibly. He could barely feel those damn eyes stifle his Yuki. Thus, it is accurate. An actual human was given this eye by the Nidaime Kyuubi. Oh, what an idiot. He stared at the eyes and thought, no matter, these eyes are no match to a demon's. Glancing over to Sasuke, he said, "You know, that won't work on me, boy." He then grasped the boy's head. "But you fought someone with Yuki before, I can tell. That Yuki is still visible on your skin." The ice that was holding Sasuke down broke as he was suddenly held above the ground by his neck by his attacker's grasp. "Who was that? Tell me who you have battled with, who has this power, because this Yuki is strong." Sasuke was no fool, now. In any case, constantly. He was well aware that this man might kill him with a simple wave of his wrist. His mouth clenched into a grin. Naruto Uzumaki. Namikaze. Naruto had an edgy demeanor. At this point, he became aware of the slightly worried expressions on Shishi's and Akio's faces as well as the presence of an unfamiliar Yuki in the distance. Finding another demon was actually fairly uncommon, but Shishi had previously stated that Naruto's good fortune had kept him alive. Given that the majority of demons view humans as an easy source of food, entertainment, and potential prey, it is likely that any other demon would have attacked him. Thus, Naruto was fortunate to have met these two in particular. Anyhow, the smell of blood in the air made him a little uneasy. He turned to see that Kiba, Akamaru, Shishi, and Akio had also noticed it. Neji yelled, "Stop," and they all stopped as he looked shocked forward. His expression was barely conscious of nausea as he whispered, "I see 3 bodies, all of them ripped to shreds." They leapt forward, pausing when they noticed the bodies strewn everywhere. They were shattered, utterly unrecognizable, and the ground appeared as though someone had scattered blood, filled balloons in an erratic manner. There was really nothing more than a few skin fragments, some tissue, and a few hairs scattered here and there. Naruto could, however, just barely feel the remains of Yuki here, and occasionally see some ice that was starting to melt sticking out amidst all of the blood and gore. He looked to her for an explanation and said, "Akio, there was a demon here. From the looks of it, an ice demon. I don't smell any of the Uchiha's scent, so I can't confirm that he's dead. He's either a hostage or is now under the care of our demon friend," she said with a bit of concern. Worried because she could tell it was a powerful demon even with this little Yuki, and annoyed that another demon was interfering. Shishi appeared troublesome as well, though for different reasons. "Fuck. It's unbelievable that he's here," he thought to himself, his eyes blazing with rage as he sped past the group in the direction where he sensed the Yuki was coming from. "Follow him," Naruto commanded, gesturing to Shishi's dwindling form. The others followed the demon without hesitation, determined to track down his prey as he darted across the forest. "I'm going to kill him. I'll fucking kill him, along with all his cronies." With a furious thought, Shishi's body started to swell and release shadows, tearing through most of the foliage in his path. The others followed swiftly behind, somewhat confused about the demon's situation. He was angry about something, and that was something to be wary of. But then, out of nowhere, a huge man who appeared to be 3 times the size of a typical man leapt down. He was enormous, bald, and had biceps that appeared as though they might contain nuclear bombs. He had on a brownish-green shirt, brown pants, and wooden sandals that Naruto thought were similar to Jiraiya's. He appeared to have big holes in place of ears as he stood in front of Naruto, and his hands were covered in large claws. With a quirked eyebrow, He said, "What makes you believe I will let you pass, humans?" His eyes were a deep yellow color with brown sclera. At that moment, Naruto saw the two tails behind him. They had 3 spikes on each end and appeared to be divided into 2 sections, with a brown top and a red bottom. "My name is Jishin Quake of the Demon Stone Clan. I am here on Nori Sama's orders to make sure you humans don't get in the way." Naruto snarled in frustration as Shishi's Yuki grew further and further away. Kiba yelled, "Naruto, leave this guy to us." Just as 2 Kibas jumped forward and slammed into the big man, with one of them yelling, "Fang over Fang." The man managed to dodge both drilling torpedoes, but he was unprepared for the massive fist covered in bandages that struck his abdomen. He staggered back a few paces, giving the others room to pass. With a knuckle crack, Choji exclaimed, "Me and Kiba can distract him a bit, so you guys go on ahead." The Akamichi saw Kiba leap away from him and rushed forward, making a single hand sign and yelling, "Partial expansion jutsu." Arm. His left fist grew as he struck the demon in the face, sending the overweight man staggering back a few more steps. Gritting his teeth, Naruto looked in the direction that Shishi had run off in. Leaving his friends here with a demon, especially one that seemed to have a strong defense if it controlled Earth, was the last thing he wanted to do. Naruto charged at the 2 heirs. "If you idiots die, I'll resurrect you and beat the living fuck out of you." And dove after Shishi. Kiba and Choji faced the enormous man, and the others did the same. TCH. Since the other demons are merely fleeing to their deaths, I will just take you 2 out. After all, human flesh tastes much better than a fawn's, Jinshi uttered before his entire body started to take on a brownish Yuki and his form started to shift. He now stood before them, a brown, leathery texture covering his body and an apparent spiked shell on his back. His face remained largely unchanged, but a turtle's sharp jaw took the place of his mouth. Is that a beak, or is that just a jaw? If at all possible, his claws sharpened, and he shed his shirt to reveal that the shell that had encircled him covered his entire chest and back. Luckily, his pants stayed on. He knelt on all fours and exclaimed, "Behold the power of the mighty stone tortoise." With a swift motion, Kiba gave Akamaru a soldier pill, and the dog growled menacingly, reddening his fur. As he prepared himself, Kiba moaned, "K. Looks like this guy's going to be tougher than I thought. Damn, me and my big mouth." As he patted his right pocket where he kept his special pilsa, Choji laughed. Choji looked at Kiba with concern as he said, "Yeah, I might actually have to go farther than I can handle." What the pills did, he knew, as well as their consequences. The moment they felt the ground beneath them tremble, they both leapt swiftly from their spots. From where they had stood, 2 massive rock pillars emerged, followed by other pillars that appeared to be positioned at random intervals. And it continued after that. The pillars were starting to attach themselves to little 3-foot thick stone poles. They heard Jinshi say, "You are now in my domain, humans. Prepare for your execution." Just before the ground gave way and started to tremble, Choji yelled, "Jump!" and he leapt quickly, clinging to a pillar while Kiba followed suit. The ground they had been standing on crumbled and plunged into an unending chasm of darkness. Kiba exclaimed, "Holy fuck," as he nearly lost his hold because he was unable to see the bottom of the pit. "We fall, who knows what happens to us." "Kiba, stay focused," Choji exhorted his friend as he watched Jishin leaping between pillars and removing one of the spikes from his back, with another appearing almost immediately after. Yuki was then thrust into it by the earth demon, lengthening its length and sharpening its tip. The Inuzuka air ducked as it was thrown like a spear, narrowly missing Kiba's head. As Kiba leapt onto one of the branches that joined the pillars, Akamaru weaved through the earthly forest, managing to body slam Jishin, though doing little to harm the big demon. Jinshi smirked and removed 2 more of his spikes. "Bah, you honestly believe that a mortal dog can do anything to a demon? Boy, you don't even have demon blood in you. What makes you believe that you can defeat me?" Jinshi exclaimed. He prepared to launch these 2 spears at the Inuzuka air as well. If it weren't for Choji taking advantage of Jishin focusing all of his attention on Kiba, he most likely would have been successful. Partial expansion jutsu. Leg. Choji delivered a powerful axe kick to Jinshi's right leg that almost broke the pillar the demon was standing on. Jinshi appeared to be shielded from Choji's attack by the shell, as evidenced by his turn toward him. Grabbing Choji's still large leg, Jinshi murmured, "One at a time, boy. You Akamichi seem to be strong, so let me get rid of the pup first." And tossing him aside, the Akamichi glared at the man as he barely managed to grab onto one of the stone branches and right himself. Kiba was already circling the demon in circles in an attempt to locate a blind spot or a location where he could at least deal damage, but he was only able to locate the neck and arms. Similar to a turtle, they appeared to be primarily composed of soft scales that would be simple to cut through. He tried to claw at the demon's neck by leaping forward, but the creature sprang back and gestured with his hand. Kiba was able to escape the pillar he was standing on when it abruptly sprouted several spikes, though his left shoulder was slightly injured due to a small cavity. Gritting his teeth, he quickly tore off his sleeve and wrapped it around the wound before leaping onto another pillar. Using the same hand gesture, Choji took one of his pills and focused his chakra, saying, "Partial expansion jutsu." Arms. His arms grew as he slammed them on either side of Jinshi, briefly trapping the turtle demon. That was sufficient for Akamaru to spring up onto his shoulder and start biting into his neck. Jinshi snarled with fury at being shoved aside by people. As he bit into Choji's larger hand, the spikes on his shell extended and became sharper, yelling, "You accursed mortals." The Akamichi tried to bear the pain, but his hands were starting to bleed so much that he was unable to hold on. Without waiting, Jinshi leapt to his left, hurling Akamaru off of him and, fortunately, into Kiba's arms, who managed to catch the airborne dog. Jumping over to his companion while monitoring their foe, Kiba said, "Okay, so far it looks like he can't throw those spears too fast, but they still seem to cut through almost anything. We can't use melee attacks because of his defense, and he can control these rocks easily. But his weakness seems to be his neck, and anything else his shell doesn't cover. Also, he's not very fast, nor does he react quickly, so we need to hit and run." Choji, beside him, nodded. "This guy has 2 tails, so I guess we can kill him by destroying his heart. Naruto said that demons become immortal when they reach their 4th tail, if I recall correctly." Kiba nodded and grinned at Choji. "Ready?" Choji grinned similarly without hesitation. "Ready?" they exclaimed as they both leapt forward, careful to look directly into Jinshi's eyes. It seems that in order to determine whether to make a spike or collapse the pillar he wanted to control, he had to look at it. Keeping that in mind, they were able to approach Jinshi for an attack when his pillar collapsed, allowing Kiba and Choji to run straight past the turtle. Jinshi smirked sharply and taunted, "You two seem quite slow, despite turtles not being the fastest." When he saw Choji pop a yellow pill into his mouth, he scowled. "Those tablets." He decided to take more spears from his back, and all the pillars except the one he was standing on started to collapse. "I'm not sure what they do, but I must stop that boy from taking that last one, or who knows what else will happen." They realized quickly that the demon had made up his mind to call this quits. Kiba complained, looking disappointed, "Looks like we'll have to use our technique much earlier than expected." With a nod, Choji leapt straight into the air and waved his hands a few times, his body expanding proportionally multiple times. "Complete expansion jutsu!" exclaimed the Akamichi, who managed to stay upright by holding onto the chasm's edges. Kiba, meanwhile, was able to clear Choji with a jump before the big boy started his jutsu. He went through his own hand signals before abruptly changing into a massive dog with 2 heads that stood on one of Choji's shoulders. Human-beast combination transformation. Double. Headed wolf. He swiftly smelled the air and saw the demon approaching the chasm by a few feet. The enormous, 2-headed dog leapt into the air and started to spin. Then, he transformed into a massive torpedo and crashed into the smaller demon. After it struck, Kiba changed course to allow them to drill lower, giving him a little more attack power because Jinshi was now in the way of his strike. As Jinshi took the blow, he clenched his teeth and attempted to grab one of his spears. Still, Choji arrived in full size and grasped 2 wires with kunai lining them. "Body expansion just you." Spiked boulder. Choji slammed into Jinshi's back, causing the shell to split apart as he dug deeper into the earth. Almost there. Just a little bit more. As Choji listened to Jinshi growl in agony and frustration, he thought. With a body glowing brown, he screamed, "You damn humans. Don't get cocky yet," as the earth suddenly raised and started to pile on Jinshi. Choji, Kiba, and Akamaru were flung aside and landed a few meters away from a cloud of debris that had formed around the demon. They both let out shocked gasps when it cleared. A massive turtle, about the size of an apartment and perhaps 30 feet tall, was standing there. He developed clawed paws in place of hands, and his face twisted to resemble a turtle. He yelled, "You die now, humans," in a loud voice. The huge turtle then flipped onto his back and slammed his front legs into the ground, causing the surrounding area to tremble violently. Kiba was barely able to stay on all fours, while Choji had no chance and fell flat on his back right away. They gaped at the scene around them as they looked up. Within 10 miles, all vegetation had vanished from the region, leaving only chilly, gray stone in its place. Choji inspected the final tablet in his box while clenching his teeth. This shall suffice. Oh no. He turned to face Kiba and saw the large wolf. Transformation trembling just to stand there. "I hope this works," he said. "Kiba, I need you to get him to open. It doesn't have to be for long, just make sure his guard is down." Kiba growled, casting a narrowed gaze in an attempt to spot any opening. "I'll try." The other head growled, spotting a gap. There, Kiba spun around once more and shot towards the gained turtle. But the demon stopped him just in time, raising his left paw to crush Kiba. "I made a bad mistake." Quicker than anyone could have imagined, Choji materialized beneath the turtle. From the paw he raised to the space beneath his armpit. "This is the end for you," exclaimed the Akamichi, who had lost all of his body fat and had a flame, like chakra covering his left hand. He slammed his fist squarely into the turtle's armpit, destroying the soft flesh inside the shell with sheer force. Jinshi's eyes grew wide, particularly when Kiba shot in a straight line into his neck. With its heart and neck utterly destroyed, the turtle's body remained motionless for a brief moment before turning into stone, and even then it started to crumble. Before Choji could even get a grip on Kiba, he leapt away from the crumbling stone corpse. Kiba's transformation decreased as he grabbed Choji now that they were safe, and Akamaru was barely able to hold onto Kiba's head with the remaining strength. Kiba gasped, a foolish smile on his face. Damn Choji. It looked like he ate 1,000 paper bombs. That was the greatest thing I've ever seen. Choji smiled too, feeling the last of the Yuki Jinshi left fade into thin air. Choji said, his eyes drooping, "Yeah. Oh damn, I can barely stay awake." Kiba, who was also a little sleepy, muttered, "Hey, come on. Stay awake buddy." He only managed to get as far as, "I'm gonna see how far I can get to Konoha. Just wait before he staggered forward and braced himself for the blow. But instead of that, he felt someone's back against his chest. A melodic voice said, "I saw it all, Kiba-san. You were amazing." It sounded pretty welcoming, in his opinion, especially given how much it sounded like admiration. Just a sliver of green hair was visible to him before he gave in to the darkness and saw someone dutifully picking up Choji and Akamaru. He had numerous aliases. He was referred to as the troublemaker by his family, an almost brotherly figure to his friends. He was a wonderful man to any lover he ever had. To those who oppose him, they're put to death. Those who attempted to overthrow him were all killed. What he was, he knew. He understood who he wasn't. Even though he was aware, he never reminded himself that he was Shishi. "I'm the brother of Akio. I am a shadow demon with unmatched strength." He knew that last bit, but he would not recall it. "I am." Similar to having a stranger standing next to you. Even though you are aware that the person is someone you do not know, you are nonetheless aware that they exist. He was aware that the solution was there. However, he declined to examine it. He steadfastly refused to recall. Being Shishi, Akio's brother, and, in a way, Naruto, he was now content. It was the shadow demon acting. He was content. He told himself this, at least, to distract himself from the memory. And yet here he was. Sprinting. Sprinting in the direction of the Yuki who made him remember who he really was by forcing all those memories into his mind. He also had to destroy him. There would never be a need to remember once he passed away. All he had to do was to move on, find happiness, and reunite with his family. His brethren, and the man who had turned him into this would fade from his memory. Everything would vanish, forgotten, and it would soon disappear. Ready or not? He asked himself, his body appearing to lose more definition and resembling a mass of hands and running hind legs. His big mouth and eyes were struggling to remain forward, facing as large lumps that resembled tumors started to form all over his body. "I'm here. One final time, I'm returning." Neji spun around quickly in midair, just in time to avoid a fire beam that was shooting past his head. The others dispersed rapidly, all taken aback to discover a young child, perhaps no older than 4, with a crossbow grasped in her tiny hands. She had freckles all over her face, red hair, and red eyes. She was wearing mostly only pointy shoes, a small party hat, puffy white pants, and a puffy pink shirt. But the guy who was standing next to him seemed really out of place. He was a clown on a huge ball covered in spikes, and he was balancing only on the spikes. In contrast to most clones, he appeared more plump. It appeared as though he was more of a puff than anything else. And he had the same little girl's red eyes. The clown exclaimed, "Look, Igao Chan, smile," in a loud voice. More people. The young child leapt up and down on her own bright blue ball and exclaimed, "Yeah. And they dodged the attack too. Yay. They won't sleep as quick as the rest did." Fire. Demon. Naruto muttered, glancing first at the girl and then at the large man. And iron? The others asked, casting a quick glance around to see if any more demons were present. Nearly failing to locate Shishi's Yuki, he called, "Neji, Shikamaru, can you get rid of them?" After Neji and Shikamaru nodded, Naruto teleported next to Sakura and grabbed hold of her. Akio and the 2 clown people then flashed past the 2 and swiftly continued chasing the escaped demon. The young girl looked in the direction they had just left and pouted, "Oh poo. They didn't want to sleep, Kaiba. Aniki." The big clown Kaiba shrugged his shoulders and looked at the 2 boys who were still behind. His smile was unsettling because he was wearing the full clown makeup. "No need to be sad. Let's play with the rest of these young kids while we're here. It would be rude to leave guests behind." With a constant smile on her face, the young girl nodded and aimed her crossbow at Neji. She exclaimed, "Nap time," while launching a cone of concentrated fire that almost struck Neji in the chest. Just in time, Kaiba leapt up with his spiked ball and smashed it where Shikamaru had been a few seconds earlier. He had managed to duck as Shikamaru leapt to his right. The ball's spikes twisted once before shooting out in all directions, forcing Shikamaru to duck under cover to avoid turning into a Swiss cheese. It was difficult for Neji to persuade himself that he was fighting a demon because the creature had the appearance and demeanor of a young child. It was a small girl, to be sure, but one that wished to kill him. He avoided another burst of fire and lunged at the girl, kicking her legs out from under her. He attempted a juken strike, which would have likely knocked her unconscious, but she raised her crossbow and blocked it, spitting something on Neji that briefly made him sick. It required a moment for him to recognize what it was. Oil. He made a hasty substitution as Igao clicked her tongue, igniting Neji's form and causing a tiny spark to appear. Where the boy had been, only bits of burnt wood showed, which startled her a little. With some nervousness, she peered around. She didn't want to let Sama down because this was the first mission he had sent her on. Not that he was a very understanding man. She looked around and sang, "Where are you, Mr. Blind Eyes?" as she straightened herself on her ball. Neji, meanwhile, made plans while hiding behind a tree. Despite carrying a crossbow, this girl knew how to keep people at a distance. With a quick leap he dove a little further into the forest, keeping an eye on the girl with his Byakugan while she bounced on her ball and continued to scan her surroundings. The giant ball that the clown was rolling around was crushing most of the trees, so Shikamaru quickly hid and managed to leap his way through them. The heir of Nara saw that the clown would not throw any of the spikes while he was being pursued. In addition, he saw that the already thrown spikes were starting to gradually crumble into dust. And while all of that was going on, fresh spikes were being put on the ball. It did seem strange that they weren't being thrown as soon as they appeared and were still on the ball. Kaiba yelled, "Keep still, brat," as he leapt to his feet and grabbed one of the spikes on his rolling ball. Shikamaru dodged and changed course, heading straight up a tree and jumping off of it, just as the ball crashed into the tree and toppled it over. The ball barely passed his head as it was thrown at him. Kaiba somehow made it back onto the ball and deflected it so that it was heading in his direction again. Shikamaru watched Kaiba from behind a bush, gritting his teeth. When he noticed the final spike on the ball, he scowled. "Metal. Style. Spinning circus disaster," yelled Kaiba, who was standing on the ball with one hand while using his fingers to make the entire thing spin at absurd speeds. He was still perplexed as to how the enormous clown was able to run on it without stepping on any of the spikes. The ball's spikes appeared to grow slightly before taking on strange forms as that was happening. They appeared to form incomplete elephants and monkeys, and a variety of animals, all of which were thin enough to pierce the surrounding ground and trees, started to take shape. With a swift motion, Shikamaru raised his hands to offer a replacement, but the animals abruptly detached and scattered, compelling Shikamaru to retreat back to the treetops. He could see, from above, that the animals with blades were dragging along the ground, carving a spiral shape into the ground. When they were almost 10 yards from Kaiba, who didn't even appear winded, they almost instantly turned to ashes. Leaping a little higher, Shikamaru ducked behind the tree, forming the semicircle with his hands as is his custom when he muses. As Neji hurriedly twisted in and out of the trees in an attempt to hide from the young girl's rapid onslaught of laser attacks, Igao begged, shooting 3 more streams of flame and bouncing around with her ball. He gained 2 insights from his fight with the young girl. She can only shoot oil from her mouth and fire from her bow, which she can charge to make it thicker, and she can also make sparks with her tongue. That's all there is to it. Although she could use the ball to run quickly or leap to higher places, he didn't really count it as a weapon. Keeping that in mind, he knew it would not be easy to defeat her. He leapt directly at her and attempted to strike her arms, but she was able to deflect both blows with her crossbow once more. He quickly extended his hand to clasp her mouth before she could spit more oil at him, not wanting to give her another chance. With his other hand, he managed to seize the crossbow she was holding, preventing her from trying to use it up close, as he would not be able to avoid it. They stood for a minute, pure annoyance radiating from Neji's narrowed eyes as they met Igao's wide ones. He said, inadvertently hissing at her in a way that was decidedly Hyuga. Please, stop being so childish. It took a few more seconds for Neji's ears to pick up something. That was smelling and whimpering, originating right in front of him. Ooh! The child abruptly jerked her head back and screamed at the top of her lungs, bursting his eardrums in the process. Shit, he moaned in his head, running out of time. Kaiba. Aniki. From where he sat, Shikamaru looked up to see the giant spiked ball with the clown grinning down at him. Kaiba looked down at Shikamaru as the last spike on his ball emerged and said, "Admit your defeat, boy," until he heard a scream that he knew. When he heard Igao exclaim, "Kaiba! Aniki!" his smile vanished in an instant, replaced by a worried expression. "Igao!" he exclaimed as he turned around and began to run on his ball, steering it toward the small demon's voice. But he didn't go very far before something started pulling on his neck and slapping him on the back at the same time. He heard a fizzle and said, "Wah!" Whack! His spiked ball stopped as he shot forward, and he was suddenly suspended in midair. He glanced at his ankles, belly, and elbows, all of which he saw were bound with ninja wire. He struggled against the wires and yelled, "Fool! You think this will keep me down? I'll rip you to shreds once I get down." It was too late for him to realize that his lower back was tagged with explosives. Boom! A few trees fell, causing the ground to quake. After falling, Kaiba's body was buried beneath the many tree branches and trunks. With quick thinking, Shikamaru was able to attach a few more exploding tags to the nearby trees, which when activated, caused more trees to fall on Kaiba's location. He just stood there and listened for any movement. Not even a second had passed before he heard something. However, the more he listened, the more he became aware of how weak the sound was getting. He leapt onto the tree pile and saw right away that Kaiba had made a big hole for himself to burrow beneath the surface. Shit. Get off me, stranger. Neji did not know how to proceed. She would just move her head farther away and scream more every time he attempted to cover her mouth. Although being burned was not as bad physically as it could have been, he was still a little uneasy about the girl's suggestion that he should do something to her. He was so close to missing the ground trembling beneath him. It's a good thing he did, because Kaiba would have most likely crushed his legs if he had not appeared from below holding a smaller iron ball. Neji leapt up and released Igao when he threw it directly at his legs. The young child succeeded in landing on her ball, but then gave it up to land on Kaiba's shoulder instead. She buried her face in Kaiba's neck and gave him a fierce hug, all the while whispering consoling words into her ear and watching Neji, who remained in his stance, watch the two demons. Though he was spitting an impressive amount of ki at the two genin, he murmured, "It's okay now, Igao-chan. Kaiba is here now. No need to cry." He smiled down at the young girl and said, "I'll get rid of the bad people now. But I need your help for that." You know what I mean, correct? Igao glanced up at him, nodding briefly before a red glow radiated from her body. Neji saw her Yuki transform from a human-like appearance to that of a monkey, and finally into a tiny ball that settled on Keiba's hand. He then put the ball next to his spiked weapon, causing the light to enter it rapidly. The ball suddenly started to melt and lengthen, creating a long chain that was attached to the spiked ball. Now you will fall, humans. When we fight as one. The metal on the other end stretched into a big hammer with spikes sticking out of one side and a cavity on the other that appeared to be giving off a faint glow. We have never been beaten. And with that, he leapt in their direction, the hammer's fire shooting out of the hole to intensify its force and speed. In order to avoid the large horizontal arc, both genin are able to jump higher. With a flick of his palm, Shikamaru fastened his leg to a tree as well. Keiba twisted his body to try to avoid the Jayuken strikes, but Neji leapt off the branch he was on and swiftly countered, his movements flowing like water. Neji hit Keiba in the heart area with a few more blows, but the clown didn't go limp or anything. It just seemed to irritate him. Leaping backward slightly, he was taken aback when Keiba purposefully missed with the hammer and wound the chain around a tree behind Neji. Keiba used superhuman strength to pull the tree from its roots and pull it in the direction of Neji and him. Neji ducked and winced as he felt a stray branch sever his left shoulder blade. When Keiba threw the spiked ball, he had to move to the side. He was holding the hammer once more and spinning the spiked ball by the chain. He turned his focus to Shikamaru, who somehow materialized behind him, and his shadow began to move swiftly in the direction of the demon clown. Keiba started to jump around, clenching his teeth each time one of the shadows approached him. Shikamaru succeeded in bending his waist slightly to the side as he threw the spiked ball towards the Nara. He only received a scrape when the ball struck the ground behind him. Shikamaru quickly pulled back his shadow, unprepared for Keiba's sudden whip of the chain that wrapped around his neck. He gave a short set of hand seals and then poofed away to be replaced by a log, trying to remain as calm as possible while being strangled by a chain. Keiba pulled the ball back to him, and it splintered to pieces with a tug. Neji materialized behind him, causing the demon to turn around and aim the ball at him. Unwise decision. Rotation. As he spun around and released chakra throughout his body, Neji moved closer to the spiked ball, which bounced off and started to move back towards Keiba. Keiba was too startled to avoid it as it struck his left shoulder, ripping off a significant portion of the demon's arm. He watched the two genin, gritting his teeth and letting his Yuki heal him as he leapt back. The trio locked gazes, prepared for anything. And they moved together. As Neji swiftly drew nearer and struck Keiba in the chest, Shikamaru ducked into the treetops to avoid the clown's line of sight. Keiba heard Igao's voice emanating from the hammer in the meantime. "Aniki, there's not much Yuki left. We must go right now." In an attempt to reason with Keiba, Igao begged. But he wasn't planning on leaving just yet. He needed to finish his work. "I have to get this done. Nori. Sama is not one to accept defeat." Gazing down at the hammer he was holding, he thought, "If I don't." He growled, his features contorting as fur started to grow all over him and the makeup vanishing to reveal an almost permanent grin on his face. "Not yet, Igao-chan. We need to get rid of these pests first." His fur was now gray, resembling the face of a dog, and he had two tails sticking out of his back. Keiba exclaimed, "It's time for you to die, but it has been fun." Yuki slipped from his body and entered the spiked ball by going down the chain. The spikes on the ball twisted into the shapes of crude drills. The iron hyena crouched down in front of the two and stuck out his tongue, letting out a horrible high-pitched laugh. Shikamaru took a gulp and prepared more explosive tags. "There are just 6 left. Gotta make it worthwhile," he thought as he turned to face Neji. He made the ram seal start to gather chakra, saying, "I need you to keep him distracted for a while. I gotta gather a bit more chakra." Neji nodded and moved his body to block Keiba's view of most of Shikamaru. Neji muttered, "Here goes." He leapt to the demon's side, hitting his abdomen, and then leapt back just in time to see the spiked ball crash into the spot he was on. Neji was sprinting forward when he charged chakra into his dodging the kick Keiba sent at him. He quickly ducked to the side to avoid being struck by the spiked ball, which was already rising. For just under a minute, Neji kept attacking the demon in this manner. He would leap forward, strike it, then swiftly jump back, dart to the side or back, and then leap forward again. Keiba had finally had enough. Even though the attacks weren't strong enough to defeat a demon, the boy was still seriously messing around with his Yuki. Even though he had no organs to damage, if the boy was unlucky enough to hit his heart, he could likely be dispatched with a few bullets. He launched himself straight up, sending Yuki into the spiked ball and hammer as they progressively grew to absurd proportions, right as Neji charged in for another attack. Neji, gritting his teeth in frustration, ran up a tree until he reached the top, leapt off, and caught Keiba mid-air. The impetuous attack took the demon off guard, and before he could raise his arms, Neji delivered 6 swift blows to his face. The demon groaned in agony as he started to descend, with Neji following closely behind. As soon as they touched down, Neji quickly assumed a well-known position. With a sudden surge of speed, he was in front of Keiba, his attack already underway, his body shifting even more, his arms reaching to his sides as his abdomen twisted and his arms reaching to either side of him as he yelled. 8 trigrams. 120. 8 palms. 2 palms. 4 palms. 8 palms. 16 palms. 30.2 palms. Keiba staggered back with each outburst, his Yuki literally vanishing from his body as the chakra started to push it out of it. He nevertheless maintained a tight hold on the hammer and ball. 4 palms. The boy was definitely aiming for his heart, because he felt some blows land uncomfortably close to it. Neji took a firm stance and unleashed the last round of attacks. At the end of the attack, one too many blows to the heart caused Keiba to stumble backward as he hit the ground, yelling, 120. 8 palms. Before he could think, a shadow linked to his own paralyzed his body. With a grin on his face, Shikamaru said to himself, success. Keiba followed suit. Keiba attempted to mimic Shikamaru's hand signals as he approached the demon clown, but to no avail. A second tendril of shadow materialized, this one encircling Keiba and encircling it with a few pieces of paper. Shit. Keiba thought, almost instantly recognizing the pieces of paper. Before he could even jump or struggle, the tags exploded, sending his left arm flying off and vanishing into a cloud of Yuki before it even touched the ground. After the smoke cleared, Keiba reverted to his human form, minus one arm. Naturally, that was regrowing before their very eyes, and Keiba's breathing was irregular and hard. Another flash of red made the hammer and chain vanish, and then Igao was back, crouching next to Keiba with tears running down her cheeks. She cried out, Keiba! Aniki! And yanked the smashed demon's head onto her lap. She quickly reached into her pocket and took out a strange glowing blue ball, then glanced up at the two genin. It resembled Naruto's Rasengan in appearance, with the exception that it appeared to be housed in a glass ball and have a black core. She broke the ball with a swift blow, engulfing both demons in blue smoke as they assumed a defensive posture and braced themselves for the worst. They were taken aback to discover that the demons had vanished, leaving only the devastation in their wake. The statue of the Shodai Hokage had a huge stone leg that a man shrouded in shadows was leaning against. He turned to face the other statue, which stood on the other side of the cascade. Uchiha Madara. He thought, interesting young man, really, with a smile on his face. His supervisor, Nori, was a few yards away. The ice demon had a sad expression on his face as he paced back and forth. With his fists clenching and unclenching in response to the amount of ice surrounding them and the river's edge being topped with ice, he hissed, "Where are they?" The man simply shrugged, his body demonstrating how at ease he was. "They were supposed to be here an hour ago. Getting rid of humans shouldn't take this long," he exclaimed. Nori. "Sama, don't worry too much. I'm sure they're just playing with the poor things and will be here soon." He started, but then he heard someone cry and a plume of blue smoke appeared in front of him. Shaking his head, he said, "Sounds like Igao," as the smoke cleared to reveal Keiba and her. Keiba's breathing and closed eyes were clear signs that she was unconscious. Igao was sobbing, leaning over Keiba and holding tight to his shirt. Igao cried, her tears wetting Keiba's shirt. They were S.So mean. Sniff. They G. Ganged up on high. He was almost killed. The man remained still, as if the scene didn't really matter. But Nori wasn't quite as aloof. He bowed down next to Igao and gave himself a full 80 degrees. He smiled and gave Igao a gentle pat on the head, seeming almost at ease. "Igao-chan, it's all going to be alright now. I'll take care of everything. Are you thirsty?" he asked, not even waiting for a response before removing a vial containing a blue liquid and clamping down on Igao's jaw. Without allowing her an opportunity to object, he violently poured the competition down the young demon's throat. Once the final drop vanished, he released her. She sobbed nearly twice as much, this time due to the excruciating pain. She felt her tiny body stretch, twist, and expand. She tried to let out a scream, but nothing came out. The shadowed man did not really pay attention, just watched. He didn't know Igao well, and she and Kaba were a pain in the ass. The man muttered, reaching into the shadows to open a hell gate. We should get going. We have the boy, and my own kid will be here soon anyway. Locations of battles were always desirable locations. So many bad feelings. Without giving Igao another look, Nori whispered, "Right," and slipped through the gate. The other man emerged from the shadows to reveal a man whose hair was sleeked back into feather, like spikes as the ice. Demon made its way through the gate. He also had a pointed nose, which contributed to his bird-like appearance. He looked almost human, with his collar covered in white fur and all-black attire. He patted her already, changing head and said, "Goodbye, Igao. Enjoy the little bit of life you have left." And with that, he too passed through the hell gate, leaving a young girl in agony and weeping. With Sakura and Akio trailing him, Naruto called back, "I'm going ahead. See if I can weaken him." He said, "When you get the chance, bind him." And then vanished in a series of red flashes, making his way directly toward Shishi. Really, it was almost humorous. He was little, naive, and incredibly uninformed. He was also devoted to his father. When all that was left was him, who wouldn't? It's just the two friends versus the world. You would have assumed that nothing could cause that love to falter. Aside from the fact that it did. Brutally. He was aware that he had changed, even though he didn't want to recall the specifics. No matter what he did, the chain would never come off of his body, and occasionally he would lose himself in the dark. Not the shadows he knew in his gut would protect him. This was darkness, pure and evil. It tried to put him to sleep by eating him. To vanish. Occasionally, he would see memories that weren't his own and then wake up by himself, surrounded by his energy that never stayed for very long. Right now, he was now the bearer of something he detested, and he would gladly live out his days in forgetfulness. His only desire is to create new, joyful memories and bury the old ones deep. So profound that not even the most senior demon could claim to have seen them. The response? Make it vanish. Everything. Including the individuals who shared in those recollections. The rogue Shishi was struck by a blur that was both black and silver, and Kitsune pierced his neck, pinning him to the ground. He was no longer even worthy of the term shadow.fox. He resembled a writhing, dark mass that was snarling and clawing to escape its captor. With the wound on his neck seemingly unaffected, he yelled, "Uzumaki, what the hell do you think you're doing? Get off me." His body changed even more this time, with his arms seeming to reach for the blade and try to extract it. The struggle became more excruciating when chains emerged from the shadows surrounding the two and clamped down on said hands. Urging himself to stay down, Naruto growled, "Shishi, you're not thinking clearly." Shishi merely glared at him, an eye appearing right in the middle of his forehead, asking, "What's wrong?" The chains snapped, and Shishi let out a booming, "I said, get off of me." The blonde managed to straighten himself in midair while clutching his chest, and he punched Naruto square in the stomach with a massive fist. Rising once more, Shishi sprinted toward his goal with all of his might. "Fuck, fuck, fuck," snarled Naruto as he vanished from view in front of Shishi and stabbed the demon with the blade once more. This time, as it attempted to consume the blade, Shishi's whole face vanished into a mass of darkness. With an eye appearing on the elder demon's chest, Naruto swiftly slashed and jumped back, watching as Shishi roared into the sky. With narrowed eyes, the youthful Namikaze called upon his monstrous Yuki, and a chorus of roars and laughter materialized around him, along with the familiar eyes and mouths. Shishi lunged forward, his left arm turning into a massive hammer and his left into the head of a mutant dog, ready to snap and snarl and eat anything. The hammer nearly tore Naruto's head off, but he managed to parry it. The demon yelled, his eyes glazing over and his voice starting to change, "Stay out of this, Uzumaki. I don't need you here." It was more than just the voice of the jovial, slightly insane demon he was familiar with. The other voice was almost old. Naruto stabbed Shishi again without even waiting to pause, this time using the spikes to pull the blade upward and tear pieces of Shishi apart. But he didn't seem to notice, as he kept trying to kill the young Uzumaki by either chomping the air or smashing the ground. Before long, Shishi finally bit Naruto, and the shadow demon smiled more icily than anyone had ever seen. The smile was short-lived, though, as Naruto vanished in a puff of smoke. A knife pricked his back again, causing him pain, but this time it went through the chains on his chest. His gaze dropped to the chains that were starting to meld into his chest instead of the blade. And when they were gone, darkness was all that remained. Naruto couldn't quite pinpoint what had transpired. For a split second, Shishi was gazing confusedly at his chest. Then his body relaxed and he went limp. He never would have imagined that Shishi could be unconscious, but at first he wondered. Then he had another realization. Shishi appeared to transform. The air around him was different, though not in the same way. Shishi used to be a storm, unpredictably strong and unstoppable, but this was something else entirely. There was experience, power, and control. And then something clicked. It wasn't just a thought. He knew in his heart that it was true. This was no longer Shishi standing in front of him. The head turned around and its half-lidded eyes met Naruto's. The forehead's eye was likewise calculatingly and icily staring at him. Getting closer, he could see the eye clearly. Ripples extending across the iris of a silver eye. Naruto. Uzumaki. The man muttered in front of the Hanyu, which was another alteration. Even though it was still Shishi's voice, someone else entirely was speaking. Older. Would you please leave me be? Naruto suddenly felt the urge to obey, to leave this demon alone, and to never see him again, whether or not it was his voice. Squashing that thought, he gritted his teeth and held tight to the handle of the sword. He growled, I don't know what the hell happened, but I know you're not Shishi. He felt the eyes and mouths around him focusing on the demon as well. For some reason, this one being was dangerous, even to the abyss. Shishi jerked quickly to get away from the blade, or rather, he took the blade's tip off the remainder of it. When Naruto noticed that his Zanbatsu had broken like a twig, his eyes grew slightly wide. With all three eyes, the demon cast a glance down at the blade. After taking the sword out of his chest and giving it a close inspection, he muttered to himself. He turned to face Naruto, his three eyes vacant of anything but indifference. An interesting metal. You sure are an interesting boy, Naruto. The only problem is your lack of control over the abyss. Naruto twisted his face into a snarl and narrowed his eyes. What the hell do you know about my Yuki? I know that all you're doing is guiding it. The fact that it laughs and screams for murder is proof that its desire is not the same as yours. While the void was once a creator, now it does nothing more than devour all in its path. His expression suddenly changed. A burst occurred on Shishi's back, and all of his body contorted to conceal his head, saying, even you. It will soon consume you as well, unless you learn to control it completely. Then again. Mouths and golden eyes materialized all around him, watching Naruto with a serene expression. This one was just wrapped around Shishi like a frayed cloak, unlike his, which hung around him like a cloud of smoke. Even I have trouble with it. So you have very little hope in controlling it. I studied it for centuries, and I can't control it any more than you because it's not naturally mine. You have the potential to control it. I have the knowledge on how to do it, now then. An abrupt pain was felt. Naruto turned to face his left and saw a mouth biting into his shoulder, a golden eye staring back at him. Naruto grunted and slashed with what was left of his sword before leaping away in the abyss surrounding him, viciously attacking his mouth and one eye. Naruto quickly realized that Shishi had vanished once more. He kept chasing after Shishi, cursing. The young demon let out a sigh and glanced down at his current location. This was uninteresting. His work was easy. Permit the Shadow Fox to pass, but divert the attention of the pursuing ones. All right, simple enough. The black blur that passed almost instantly engulfed his entire body. A tiny wisp of red Yuki was all that remained before it vanished into thin air. Shishi bolted, his form going back to something resembling normal. Naruto Uzumaki. He might end up being a nuisance. Whatever the case, he will provide a lot of entertainment in the near future, he thought, his icy smile remaining constant as he peered up at the sky. Soon. The desired outcome will soon materialize after a millennium of waiting. It's time to start this show and find my stuff. He stopped, sending Yuki into his claws, thinking, "This body is starting to annoy me." His hand shot out in front of him, tearing into the air and warping like an old film in the process. Shaking open the area before him, it revealed a stunning display of red and black hues while yells and screams emerged from the opening. With that, he stepped into the void and let it close behind him, his chuckle echoing into the darkness as the wound, in reality, closed, leaving no trace of it ever having existed. "That boy's going to be a pain soon. But it won't be any fun if he's not involved," he muttered, peering over his shoulder. He stopped exactly where Shishi's Yuki vanished, gritting his teeth. "Oh no. I can't find him anywhere else." He paced back and forth on the tree branch where the Yuki ended abruptly, thinking to himself. He saw that there was not a single living creature within a mile's width, as if that wasn't strange enough. Feeling the nature chakra in front of it, he scowled. Or, more accurately, lack thereof. It seemed as though the chakra had been broken apart. He realized the Uchiha's scent was fading and growled. It was going to rain soon, based on the quantity of clouds that were obscuring the sky. He let out another growl and waved his Yuki to indicate where he was. In an instant, a shadow emerged from the earth, revealing Sakura and Akio. He turned to Akio, frowning, and said, "This is where Shishi's Yuki trail ends. We can't follow him from here. I need you to go back to your home and look for him there. Be sure to be back in less than 24 hours, understood?" With a nod of comprehension, Akio vanished into the darkness, and her Yuki vanished even faster, leaving only traces. "You think she'll be okay?" Sakura inquired, appearing a little concerned. Being a very strong demon, Shishi hardly ever acted logically. He truly loved to make sure that everyone knew how chaotic he was. He whispered, "I'm sure she'll be fine. It's Shishi who is different," and held up Kitsune's broken blade to her. "He was acting completely different, and he broke my Zanbatsu like it was a twig. He was acting a hell of a lot calmer than I've ever seen him. I'm sure Akio can find something out about what's happening to him." He grimly returned to his original location. "For now, let's get to the Uchiha." The two Konoha nin were speeding through the forest once more, and as they got closer to the Uchiha's scent, a sense of dread washed over them. In the meantime, in the demon realm, a certain red-haired demon was passing some pictures of other demons, each of them wearing a strange crown with 9 prongs that wrapped around their head like a small sun, as he walked down a hall lit by torches. The final image was of her, wearing a black skirt and red battle kimono with a katana strapped to her hip. Her expression was mildly amused and composed. Gazing at the one in front of her, she sighed. The image displayed a man who appeared to be slightly older than her, with the same red eyes and red hair styled in spikes that reached his mid-back. However, the man's expression was far more serious and contained a hint of confidence, something Hikari herself hardly ever displayed. "Kurama. Oni-sama," she thought somberly as she gazed at the man who was meant to be the Kyuubi of the moment. He didn't particularly like people, but he never bothered to interact with them. He didn't become angry that humans wouldn't have the gall to summon a creature of his stature until he was called upon. But when it came to demons, he was almost entirely the complete opposite. Though he was still a little conceited, he was considerate enough to listen to people beneath him and always considered what would be best for the fox demons and the demon realm as a whole. Hikari shut her eyes and allowed her thoughts to stray back to their childhood. A small Hikari exclaimed, "Oni-sama," with her tail wagging joyfully as she ran to a teenager who was holding a large book in one hand that was nearly as big as she was and had a ball of black flame hovering above it. The young man appeared to be about 16, and she looked about 6. He set the book down, turning his head to watch the flame go out and giving her a bored but still interested look. With a hint of frustration, he said, "What is it this time, Imoudo?" Really, rather than bothering him, she could always bother one of the housemaids. She could play by herself, what the hell? She exclaimed, "Look what I found," and held up a knife that appeared somewhat rusty. The elder demon took it from her hands right away, holding it close to him while wearing a fierce expression. Glancing down at the knife, he said, "Please be careful, I don't want you accidentally harming yourself." It dawned on him then that this knife was composed of metal. Just metal, nothing ostentatious like what's typically found in the demon realm. "Metal human. You went to the human world, didn't you?" he demanded, his body tensing as he gripped the knife and bent it until it was nothing more than a ball. Suddenly, he reeled on the little demon, who flinched under her brother's glare. Between them, the wooden handle was nothing more than a jumble of splinters. Hikari's ears tipped back, her tail stopped wagging, and she tried to lay as low as she could, appearing to further shrink. It appeared as though she might cry for a brief moment. Then, barely allowing a pout to grace her little face, she tried to glare at her brother, mustering what little courage she had left. "I went alone because you wouldn't want to come with me," she exclaimed, stomping her foot to emphasize her point. Kurama glared for another second, and Hikari's glare waned until tears welled up at the corners of her eyes and she started to sniff. He gestured for her to approach while extending his arm and letting his 7 tails and ears protrude. He did this by blowing out his nose. His face now more concerned than angry, she shuffled quickly in close, letting his arm round her as he picked her up and settled her on his lap. He gently stroked her back as she leaned into his chest, a tiny smile lighting up her little face. "Please tell me next time you're bored. I can get one of the servants to look into getting you out, maybe go to a few villages near here," he said, rubbing her back gently. "I don't want you going back there." Her head left his chest, and the smile faded, her glare coming back as she glanced up at him. She crossed her arms angrily and exclaimed, "No, I want to go back. I like it there." He gave her a long look before letting out a sigh. He scowled and said, "You're impossible, you know that?" with a slight glare. "And you're a meanie." He just rolled his eyes, picked her up off the ground, and went back to reading the book next to him. "Just don't go to the human world alone again." With her most adorable puppy dog eyes and a pout, she asked hopeful, "Then will you go with me tomorrow?" and waved her tail back and forth. Without even looking back, he said dismissively, "I'll think about it." He was well aware that he would give in if he gave her a look. Furthermore, a kyubi.in. Training never yields to anyone, goddammit, particularly their younger sister. Feeling a little let down by the lack of response she had hoped for, she made her way out of her brother's room to join the maid. Her stories about her time spent among people were always the sweetest. Her instincts told her something had happened, so she was startled out of her nostalgia when she saw the space next to her rip open to reveal a panting Akio. She looked around and said, Shishi is missing. Do you know if he came back to the demon realm?" Hikari scowled and shook her head. "I doubt he's here because I haven't felt his Yuki when he opens a portal here." Akio swallowed and encircled her, asking, "Where are you, Shishi?" The entity that was still Shishi muttered, "This place hasn't changed a bit." As it peered around the opulent room, which was decorated with a few red drapes over the windows and was made entirely of stone, with a single bed in the center and 4 pillars that reached the ceiling, each with what appeared to be the faces of the damned wrapped around the base. "Home sweet home, eh?" With a smile as cold and heartless as ever, the vulture, like demon, murmured, "I am glad that you are comfortable, King." "Thank you, usomaru.kun." The demon exited the room at that point, and the king let himself sprawl out on the bed. Sigh. These are going to be quite eventful years. I'm going to have to call up a few old friends, get my army back, and if that isn't enough, I can feel that Madara boy is still alive. Such an annoying boy. He thought, his 2, normal, eyes closed, the one on his forehead languidly open. Annoying, but much better than having absolutely nothing to do. With that thought, he smirked as he glanced to the left of the bed, where a single, enormous and incredibly detailed portrait depicted the majestic 10-tailed demon wolf rampaging over a crumbling earth, the elements swirling around him in a display of pure destruction. Finally, right on the wolf's head, there was an identical eye to the one on the king's head, with the exception that the eye on the painting had 9 tomos, 3 on each ring, on them. Spikes of ice rose from the earth as the earth was split open beneath the enormous creature. Giant spheres of fire fell from the sky as if it were bleeding, and the rain fell while tornadoes rampaged over the lands, lightning striking what little forest wasn't already destroyed and causing fire. With a small cackle that quickly turned into a chuckle and then a horrible laughter, he thought, soon. Everything will soon be the way it was supposed to be. The lesser demons in the halls cringed in fear at the man's evil laugh, darkness seeming to grow stronger as the torches in the halls offered meager light and refused all forms of warmth. This place is dark. Is that a negative aspect? You won't be bothered by anything here because you are blind. Who are you? Is it really that important? Relax. Rest. Give yourself permission. Everything is going to be alright. Alright. I suppose I'm a little worn out. I'm having trouble thinking clearly. I cannot even recall my intended location. I had meetings with people scheduled. Individuals who hold significance in my life. That's quite pleasant. Just let go now. I promise not to let anything negative happen again. Alright. Good night, regardless of who you are. Young Shishi, good night. A sick smile twisted the face into golden eyes. This boy is way too easy to goad sometimes, he thought as he got out of bed and left the room. Ignoring the golden eyes that occasionally showed up on his clothing, the king strolled down the hallways. He was used to them showing up for no apparent reason most of the time. Unfortunately, they usually scared off a couple of his servants. Walking the halls by yourself became quite monotonous when no one was around to converse with. He shrugged, so no one could see him, and rounded a corner to find two big wooden double doors with guards stationed in front of them. When they saw their king, they both stood alert and rigid, and then they both opened the doors to let the man inside. The monarch merely smiled and proceeded inside, with the doors slamming shut and the guards appearing a little less tense behind them. The space was actually a massive throne room, resembling the skeleton of a monstrous creature. Large, broad pillars that extended from the spine and curved downward into pillars that resembled ribs supported the expansive roof. Though it wasn't very attractive, there was a gray stone throne at the very back, facing the doors. It was rather square shaped, with an emblem where the legs should have been on the seat. He shook his head and sighed. It's great that my throne has been replaced, but it could have used some TLC to look a little nicer. However, it appears exactly as I left it. Can't blame them for keeping everything exactly the same, he thought to himself as he sat on the throne and relished the comforting sense of authority that accompanied it. In less than 5 minutes, the doors opened to reveal an ice demon that was well known to everyone. His eyes exuded reverence and a sense of wonder. The demon bowed before the throne, lowering his head in submission, and the king just smiled at him. My lord, it is wonderful to see you once again. Nori.kun. King uttered, his characteristic icy smile visible as he crossed his right leg over his left knee. He looked around the room, though it appeared as though he was thinking about something else. And I think it wonderful you have kept this place in such state. Admittedly, I was hoping for a few changes, but I guess that now that I am here, I can make them myself. The king shrugged and started toward the double doors, with Nori walking silently behind. Things have changed greatly. Humans are actually beginning to use their own source of power. I suppose that they are now more valuable than they were a few millennia ago. The flames always seemed to move away from them as they started to move down the hallways together, specifically, the monarch. As he moved to the right of his king, Nori grinned and thought, the humans are more divided than they have ever been. This will make things a lot easier, Nori said as the darkness around them moved and then gathered to the left of the king. The shape asked before fully transforming into Usomaru, it is good to see the three of us together once again. Wouldn't you agree, Nori? Sama? He bent his head and said to the king, the castle is a bit dusty. I do apologize for that, but it's nonetheless in great condition. The king turned a corner and said dismissively, no matter. It's a castle, fill it with a few servants, and I'm sure it will be just fine. After walking for a minute more, they were outside the castle. There was a red glow coming from somewhere ahead of the completely black clouds that covered the sky. There was a wall surrounding the castle, not very large but entirely composed of skeletons from various species, some of which would only be found in myths told by humans. In a sudden flash, the three vanished and resurfaced atop the wall, peering down. The castle and its surroundings were constructed directly next to a volcano, and at the foot of the enormous mountain flowed a river that appeared to be blood. The king, however, was amused by what was within the liquid and smiled. As the water bubbled and red steam rose, numerous people could be seen screaming and writhing in agony in the river of blood. People were correct to believe it was a river. But it wasn't of fire, thought Nori, crossing his arms and grinning sarcastically as Usomaru knelt and grinned sickly as he peered down at the river. With his hands tucked into his pants pockets, the king observed both of his finest men taking in the spectacle. They remained the same, even after all this time. He heard the screams of the human souls below and thought, sometimes it's great how nothing changes, my dear home. When he abruptly stopped and turned to face the two statues in the waterfall, Naruto grimaced. The end of the valley. Red Queen adhered to his back as he thought, Hashirama and Madara once fought here. He was holding his still, broken sword in his right hand. Sakura was beside him, her claws flexed in a rhythm that only she could perceive, her gauntlets out. Sakura murmured, we're going down, aren't we? as she peered over the edge and observed the waterfall empty into the sizable lake below. Naruto nodded, then crouched down to grasp the valley's edge. He then planted his feet against the wall and used chakra. As he started to descend the edge, he whispered, "Come on. We came this far, we have to at least see this as far as we can." Sakura trailed closely behind, keeping her eyes and ears open and silent. However, the mist rising made things a little challenging. Once they were at the bottom, they stealthily started looking around. Sakura moved toward the lake, a little confused by the volume of mist. She discovered why almost immediately. There was an uncontrollable boiling of the lake's water and a red glow beneath the surface. She squinted and gave Naruto a single chakra pulse to attract his attention. She spoke once he was by her side. Before more could be said, the water started to shift and glow brighter as something large started to emerge. "There's something in the water. And it seems to be boiling it." A large appendage of sorts appeared and attempted to slam both of them into the ground, so they both jumped back. Sakura flipped backwards, clenching her eyes and flexing her hands covered in gauntlets as Naruto sidestepped. In front of them lay a lava mass that was gradually taking on the appearance of a human. It had no legs and a pair of large arms, with the bottom half appearing to be a dress made entirely of lava. Its eyes were really hidden. Its arms ended in huge fists with metal bumps at the knuckles, and on its shoulders were a few spikes that resembled red-dot hot metal plates. It moved like a slug, but it wasn't at all slow. It retracted its fist and hurled the melted rock in Naruto's direction. Said Jinchuriki ran through hand seals and dodged once more, teleporting to the center of the lake. With his cheeks swollen, he exclaimed, "Water! Style! Water bullet jutsu!" and spat out a gigantic ball of water that grew as it dragged along the water, gathering more and more until it was almost half the size of the golem. It crashed onto it, the bottom part hardening momentarily and sending steam rising to the surface before the heat escaping the object caused it to melt again almost instantly. As the water surrounding her started to rise, Sakura was busy running through her own seals and rearing her fist back. Water! Style! Shark missile jutsu! A massive shark formed entirely of water leapt from her feet and began to chomp down on the lava creature while steam rose once more. Naruto leapt into the air and took another breath after making a few hand gestures. Water! Style! Water bullet jutsu! A second water ball shot in the direction of the lava golem, hardening one arm to the point where it toppled over the others with great force. Still, he saw something in the creature's severed arm stump right away. There it was. A smaller child's hand with black lines where he guessed the veins should be. How in the hell? He quickly reformed the hand and flipped back to avoid it, scanning the area for any gap he could take advantage of. Regretfully, it appeared that the golem was able to withstand the blows as well as turn and maintain its sightsa if it had Anya on him. Sakura repeatedly hit it with water attacks from behind, but it continued to face him and at one point to slam its palms in the places where he was. Given that he ran largely straight, it didn't appear to really try to hit the locations he was expected to be in. Seems fairly intelligent, but incapable of growing from his errors. He can move his lathe quickly, but he cannot hit us as long as we are moving. Water jutsu also doesn't seem to have much of an impact on it. Okay. So, shit. Gritting his teeth, he charged straight at it, avoiding its fist and calling forth the Red Queen. He thought, I wonder if lava can overheat, and he raised the sword until it was completely red. After stabbing the object in the left arm with the blade, he let go of the handle and applied the brake, which caused the blade to explode violently. Its arm and half of its abdomen were blown off, leaving a huge void in their place. Naruto nearly wished he hadn't when he looked more closely. What in the? He saw the little clown demon from earlier and stood there, gaping. But unlike the last time, she had blue vein like lines all over her body, and her face was twisted in pain. She was soon covered in lava once more, and as it turned to face Naruto, it slammed into the boy's side, growing a new arm. He was instantly aware that there was no pain. Though it wasn't painful, he could feel his side sizzling and burning. His eyes widened as he looked to his side and saw the gaping eyes and mouth on his ribs before they vanished. The skin had healed, albeit slightly pink. That's new. He thought to himself as he watched the massive golem attempt to slam Sakura while the girl jumped around, occasionally creating walls out of shadows to aid in her jumps in different directions. Sakura exclaimed, "We're running out of ideas," and flipped back to give the golem some space. Started to scuttle away from the water. Quick thinking led her to sprint straight up the edge of the cliff, high enough to potentially make herself less of a target for the golem. She then made a few hand gestures, pressing her palm up against her canteen's opening and then pulling it back to reveal a whip of flowing water. Water. Style. Water whip jutsu, she exclaimed, cracking the whip once and encircling herself with one of the rocks protruding from the wall. She tore the chunk of rock from the wall and threw it in the direction of the golem with a powerful tug that was only a woman could have. For an instant, the fragment of rock embedded itself in its shoulder, seemingly causing no harm. It writhed then, a red chakra bursting from the wound. But that wasn't the only thing coming out of the wound. A girl is screaming, I hear. She stopped using the water whip and observed the golem writhing while fragments of it fell all around it. And then she saw the girl, too. Tears of fire ran down her cheeks, a silent scream on her lips. When Sakura no longer focused on the chakra at her feet, she almost lost her balance. She also noticed that the girl's right arm had a piece of rock torn out, exposing the red Yuki. She was unable to take her eyes off the golem as it reformed itself and the lava encircled the girl's form once more. When Naruto saw the golem raise its arm again, determined to kill Sakura, he winced. Fuck. He teleported to her and took hold of her before moving to the opposite side of the lake while continuing to search for the creature. A single hand gesture and a swift thought caused 3 shadow clones to materialize. He grimaced and said, study it. Try to find a weak point. With a silent salute, the clones all advanced toward the golem, hurling a few shuriken and kunai. And try not to hurt the demon inside. When he went to check on Sakura, he discovered the girl's sobbing. She whispered, her expression disbelieving, she's just a little girl. A demon, but nonetheless, she's just a little girl. A child. Naruto gave a nod. I know. Why would someone do that? It's horrible. He paused and turned back to face the golem. From what I can tell, even demons have monsters among them. Monsters willing to do those kind of things to children. Akio and Hikari moved quickly as they browsed through rows and rows of books that were all neatly stacked on the ground, though a few pieces of paper were scattered here and there. A massive book, nearly the size of a 5-year-old, lay at the end of the rows. It was obviously old because parts of the cover were missing and the leather was a soiled brown color. This, for some reason, had no effect on the majesty of the insignia at the book's center. 10 spikes protruding from a circle around a central star. Hikari waved her hand and the book opened to a page that had been marked. There were numerous drawings and notes about a lot of Yuki in one place. This should tell me things about the strange Yuki within Shishi, Iniki said. To be honest, it didn't take long for everyone to realize that Shishi was not quite right. There was something unnatural about everything, let alone that he was as powerful as Shukaku. She continued to read the book, and when she reached the last few blank pages, she winced. That is, until she realized that the pages were almost translucent in some way. It was almost as though something was. When she saw that it was a seal, she rolled her eyes. Composed of invisible ink. Now that I think about it, it's funny how obvious it is, she said, pressing her palm to the seal and using her Yuki to pump it. Her hand was slightly burned when the seal rejected the Yuki almost instantly. She waved her hand around, hissing in pain as her eyes narrowed at the seal, which glowed once more before disappearing once more. Putting the book back where it belonged, she sighed and muttered, looks like we're getting nowhere here. Come on Akio, we have to find a different way. Then she turned to face the exit. Understood. The two of them exclaimed as they started to leave the library, not realizing that something was stirring in its sleep with every passing second, and that a terrible transformation was starting to take Naruto. At times like these, he couldn't help but wonder how long it had been since his last awakening. As he made his way through the cave, he peered at the glowing eyes of various shapes, sizes, and hues. There were blue, yellow, and mostly red ones. Ultimately, he was searching for the glowing green eye at the bottom of the cave, with a grin nearly visible beneath the eye. From what appeared to be the shoulder, another pair of eyes protruded. The eye stepped forward into the light, and the kings called out, "It's good to see you again, old friend." A rough voice said, "And I thought you were fucked last time I saw you." The smaller pair of eyes gave a little giggle. A tall man with hair so spiky it would have looked ridiculous on anyone else stood there, which only served to heighten the man's intimidating appearance. His right eye was covered by an eye patch, and each tip of his spiky hair bore a bell. wearing black military boots, a black shirt with the sleeves cut off, black baggy pants, and a white vest with the number 11 on the back. He looked extremely stylish. A small girl with bright pink hair, wearing a black shirt that was probably a size too big on her, over black shorts, and blue flops all over her feet, was perched on his shoulder. "Hi there, I'm Yachiru. Are you Kenny's friend?" she waved, beaming broadly. The golem attempted to swipe, smash, or punch the clones as they were almost dancing around it. They were almost completely out of chakra, and they still hadn't discovered anything new about this. A clone even attempted to attack from below, but the device responded with a massive ripple of pure heat that destroyed it and released another burst of steam that threatened to destroy the remaining clones. However, that did not mean they had run out of ideas altogether. One of the clones yelled, "Now," as he broke through the hand seals. "Water. Style. Shark missile jutsu," he exclaimed, and the other 4 followed suit. Suddenly, 4 large sharks made of water shot forward and bit into the golem, exploding at the same time to shower the golem in water. The golem's skin turned to rock, but before it could cool down, several clones stabbed it with hooks, kunai, and other weapons. Each weapon had ninja wire strings attached to its handle, and each weapon struck a different area of the golem. Each clone let out an exhausting cry as they each tugged the wire in a different direction. The golem started to crumble and make some noise. The left arm was hit first, followed by the right, and finally the chest started to rip apart. The lava inside was still swirling, but not as much. One of the clones saw the little girl's head and torso almost immediately. They were mostly covered in lava. But before anything more could be done, the girl and the small amount of lava inside the hard shell leapt out and swiftly expanded, with the girl appearing to scream but no sound coming out. It soon became clear that the golem used the girl's yuki to heal itself whenever it sustained damage. One of the clones exclaimed, "We're running out of ideas here," and joined the others in circling the golem as it was expanding back to its previous size and allowing the shell it had escaped from to crumble. 4 other clones, who were at a much greater distance, paid close attention to everything the creature did. One of the clones watching exclaimed, "Keep it up, we still don't have enough information on this thing." The other clones nodded or shouted in agreement. A little further off, Sakura and Naruto both dashed forward at top speed, with Naruto opening Red Queen's seal as his body started to change due to the abyss growing out of his back. Sakura silently swallowed. She was always creeped out by the eyes and mouths. She still ran beside him in spite of this, and she could hear the golem groaning. The clones watching the battle all gave a silent signal and scattered to provide Naruto with the information they had gathered. He gave an inward groan. "Not much of it is useful to us. It will only regenerate if the lava is removed. Furthermore, the rock won't exactly remain hard if we wash it. How to proceed, how to proceed?" He surveyed the remaining clones around him. "Everyone, try to pry that thing open one more time." "Yosh." The clones once more surrounded the golem and assumed a stance as they ran through the same hand signals. "Water. Style. Shark missile jutsu." And just like the last time, the clones pulled fiercely as they threw a variety of weapons at the hardened golem. 4 sharks also bit into the golem. The real Naruto leapt forward, covering his abyss with a large hand, as soon as he saw the girl. He quickly yanked the girl out of the lava, taking care not to hurt her in any way as he did so. As he held her to his chest, he noticed with mild curiosity that his yuki had quickly wrapped around him to shield his arms and chest. He was too quick to consider it further when he witnessed the girl whimpering in agony and lava starting to emerge from her skin. She opened her eyes for the first time and whispered, "It hurts, make it stop," as she cried lava. Naruto's own eyes grew wide when he noticed that her eyes had been replaced by rocks. With the lava still encircling her, she croaked, Kaba. Aniki. Where are you? It hurts. Make it stop, please." Gritting his teeth, Naruto peered down at her. "What on earth should I do? How do I go about this?" Breathing to regain his composure, he focused on the nagging presence in the back of his mind. "Hikari. We're facing an issue." World of Demons. Having discovered what they could, Hikari and Akio were now at the library's doors. Hikari looked around her with wide eyes, jumping a little at the voice in her head. Not that I blame her, I would have freaked out too. Upon realizing that Akio was the only person beside her, she exclaimed, "Naruto-kun. What's not right? I need your aid right now. Something is there that I have never seen before," Please come here as soon as possible. Naruto's voice, desperate, rang out. You understand that Akio and I are en route. Akio-chan, we have to go back to the human world. It seems that Naruto-kun is in trouble, the shadow demon said, turning to face Akio. Akio nodded as Hikari opened a portal in front of them, allowing them to return to the human world. Let's go. Also, so much suffering, it exists within my mind, put an end to it. It's because of your excessive effort. Give it all up. You are not required to awaken. You are not needed at this time by anyone. You can unwind now. My family. Everyone is okay. Everybody is content. They are no longer in need of your protection. That's what you've always done, after all. You have only ever taken action to ensure your family's happiness. Yes. Joyful. They seem content, so, I'm content. Go to sleep. Shishi, go to sleep. Everything will end soon. Just go to bed. I'd like to see them, I desire. to go to sleep. That is the entirety of it. Go to sleep. The king's golden eyes opened once more, but this time he appeared more irritated. What a grating child. I know love can drive people crazy and foolish, but come on, he looks so incredibly frail. I don't understand why Usomaru-kun thought this would make a good vessel. Nevertheless, it's easy to appease the child, he thought as he rose from the big red pillow he was sitting on. Keeping the boy quiet was getting a little annoying. Normally, his tenacity would be commendable, but right now it served mostly as a diversion. He still needed to build an army. Although he didn't need one, having a show was always pleasant. He laughed as he left his rooms, his mind filled with images of chaos, violence, destruction, and rage. Seeing the humans fight was always too much fun. Really, it was adorable. They were all motivated and filled with desire. A few aspired to the top so that they could be observed by all. Others desired to blend in with the millions of people around them, to be unremarkable, to be nothing more than normal. And some others. Well, he wasn't alone. They were the viewers and the conductors. The troublemakers were the ones who orchestrated the maneuvers behind the scenes to bring about the outcomes they wanted. And, of course, the witnesses were the viewers. Those who were interested in witnessing how the cattle were manipulated by the conductors to create a stunning show. He was both of them combined. Even though he was not a conductor, he had enough human knowledge to anticipate human behavior. However, he noticed that in the name of their beliefs, they seemed to be making increasingly foolish decisions these days. It was really strange. He never understood why they would act in that way. All he knew was that they would. It was similar to witnessing a dog drool at the sound of the bell. You know why it occurs, but you're not sure what causes the drool to occur. Is it the actual food? Is it the bell's sound? Is it that when the bell rings, you know there is food? Is it just the tiny chance that there could be food? He was unaware of it and didn't give a damn. He didn't really need to understand what made people tick, it just happened and worked. All he needed to know was when and how often they ticked. He laughed a little as he thought back to all the arguments he had to mediate. How cute, oh. Really, all the king had to do to start trouble was nudge someone in the right direction. At times, it was as easy as one guy pushing another or one family's jewelry getting into another's possession. Blood feuds would start very soon, and then fun. Of course, full-scale battles were also fantastic, but those were more difficult to make. He might pull off the classic, make one person fall in love with another, then they both mess it up, maneuver. Or the entire declaration of wanting to be exempt from a rule. After all, war was awesome. All that would need to happen is a single doubt or thought. He was powerless over a human. Yes, you can control their body, but not their true self. Perhaps if he took drugs, he could, but not their soul, their actual selves, their essence. Naturally, a person's entire being is ultimately linked to that core. He could ultimately influence that person to the point where they choose to initiate the war if he can magnify that one thought or misgiving. Ultimately, he was more interested in the very acts that humans took than in the beginning of the war. The murdering, the arguments of verbal and physical, the bloodshed, the sobbing and the grinning, the suffering and the joy, and everything in between. He enjoyed witnessing the depths to which humanity could descend as well as their heights. They were ultimately the best source of amusement. When he first witnessed them using sticks and rocks to kill prey, he was just a cub. And now they used poison, common objects, and a variety of other things in addition to their own hands and weapons. They even used one another. Yes, that's right. When he burns them all to the ground, he will miss them. Though it wasn't personal, he reasoned that he could simply let them go and move on. He had heard that there were a few planets with recently formed, immature life that could be guided. A god to worship was necessary for every new existence. Why is he not one of them? He would obviously need other gods to accompany him. Being the only immortal in a new world can be isolating in relation to gods. He laughed and called forth a massive gorilla demon, with dark brown fur and white target patterns running the length of its tail. He smiled at the thought of the Sanin, who thought he was a god, and said, "Tell Nori.kun that I am ready to go to the human world. I want to see what this little orochimaru boy is up to. I hear he's considered a monster by the other humans." Meanwhile, the gorilla left. "All right, then, god. Get ready. The devil is going to meet you soon." Returning with Sakura and Naruto, Naruto was starting to feel uneasy. Initially, all he needed to do was maintain an abyss Yuki layer surrounding himself, and the mouths would promptly consume the liquid earth. But as time went on, he started to realize that he was changing into agitated. Normally he was a patient man, but at this moment, "I sense that. Hungry. Something is needed by me. I have to get on with this." "Not at all, it's not a pointless endeavor. Someone is being saved by me, I have to keep them alive." Still, though, incredibly hungry, he quickly shook his head, choosing to focus all of his attention on the current issue. Need to. But the gaze on his darkness. Did they always look this crazy? Sakura. I need you to start sending out pulses of your chakra. Akio and Hikari should be able to pinpoint our location with that, he said. His voice warped, from strained and human to something between demonic and hungry, and Sakura shuddered a little. Sakura nodded, shutting her eyes and causing the ram to seal. She briefly flexed her chakra before releasing it in steady pulses that resembled a heart. She opened one eye to look at Naruto while she was doing this. It appeared as though he was weak and easily distracted, and it was taking all of his resolve to keep from running away. She said, "Nay. Naruto, you don't look so good." She worriedly glanced at him. Thank goodness, Akio and Hikari showed up at that precise moment, running over to the two of them. After glancing at the young girl, both demonesses quickly surrounded Naruto. What happened? Hikari questioned, studying the lava closely as it was constantly being consumed and renewed by the mouths surrounding Naruto. Naruto gasped out, his face contorted as if in pain, sweat trickling down his brow. Don't know. Found her like this. Tried to kill us. When Hikari realized this, she paused to give him a brief glance. Naruto.kun. His eyes met hers, but he was trembling and growled, "Don't worry, just help her, please." Had she always had this kind of face? Tasty? He felt as if he was going to swallow her whole, and not in a sexual sense either. Remain composed. I am unable to. Eat. Eat me. Suckos and eat everything. A voice that sounded just like him but that he knew wasn't his roared. It was very alluring. He ought to comply. Damn it. Screw off. You wouldn't exist without me. I defy you to skip me. He gave a quick shake of his head and turned back to the topic at hand. I said fuck off, he said. See, can you help her? He was taken aback to see Hikari start to cry and shake her head. She said, her voice breaking near the end, every demon has a signature to their Yuki, very much like the DNA in humans. And just like regular DNA, she's been mutated beyond recovery. I can't help her. She ran her fingers through the young girl's hair, the Kyuubi not much affected by the fire. She whispered to the girl, who put her tiny arms around the older woman's neck, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Akio exclaimed, nothing? Adot, are you sure? There must be something we can do. But Hikari simply shook his head. There's nothing I can do. I don't know how to meddle with a demon's Yuki code. The little girl cried, Make it stop. Please. It hurts. Aniki. I want. Aniki. Hikari nodded, sobbing as flames encased her right arm. She turned her gaze from Sakura to Akio and then back to Naruto, saying, it's okay. I'll make it stop. He nodded, but the Jinchuriki also appeared more dejected than before. She inhaled deeply, closed her eyes, then brought her hand back and smashed it squarely through the little girl's chest. She saw the little girl's mouth open in a silent scream and she started to cry, her breath slowly slipping away. The young girl closed her eyes and a tiny smile flashed across her lips. She uttered, "Aye. Aniki. I see Aniki." Just before going limp, the lava fell her body almost instantly, and all four of them bowed their heads. Her body burned brightly, slowly turning into embers that vanished into the wind. A tiny red ball of light hardly made it out of Naruto's arms before it gradually vanished. Hikari wiped her eyes and muttered, "She can rest now. I hope she finds this Aniki of hers." While Sakura and Akio watched in dismay as Naruto's ominous shadows started to disappear, they all appeared to be whispering with excitement. He pinched the bridge of his nose and looked up at the sky. Turning to face the others, he meets their eyes and says, "The Uchiha's trail has been lost, and we have injured teammates. Not to mention that we lost one of our top power houses. It's time for us to return and check on the others." The others nodded, albeit somewhat disturbed by the death of a small girl. "We can search for Shishi and the Uchiha later. For now, we need to make sure our friends are safe." They all turned and headed back towards the village, their hearts heavy, their families lost, and more questions than they had when they started the retrieval mission. He stood before Tsunade, his eyes betraying his disappointment and grief, his face a mask of emotion. He had lost his brother.in.law as well as the Uchiha. As a result of continuously expelling chakra to ensure that Akamaru took the least amount of damage from his attack, Kiba developed severe chakra burns. Choji's consumption of pills also caused him pain. Although they remained stable, they haven't yet awakened. Hana made sure Akamaru was okay as well, but the dog wouldn't leave Kiba's side. Aside from a few broken bones or minor bruises, Neji and Shikamaru were unharmed. Sakura and Naruto were unharmed. They were just low on chakra. Tsunade went over the mission report again, and everyone stood silently, with Hikari and Akio on either side of him, Sakura beside Akio, and Shikamaru to Hikari's left. She sighed, teasing her features, and then said something. "All right then. The mission was, regrettably, a failure, and it seems that we've lost Shishi the demon, thus a blow to our power. Nonetheless, I'm glad to see that most of everyone here is at least somewhat unharmed. Now then, you say that Shishi was somehow taken over?" She sighed at Naruto's nod. "Explain." "The best way to put it is that it was Shishi's body, but it was a completely different person. Kind of like should Ino use her mind control jutsu, but this seems somewhat more permanent. He also had the strange eye on his forehead, which I'm sure means something. Lastly, he simply seemed older. He's immature, that much is obvious, but when I fought against him, he was more controlled than his usual animalistic self. He actually planned most of his words and gave little away. After talking about mostly nothing, he simply left. And I gave chase, but he disappeared before I could catch him. Though, the area where his trail ended was devoid of both nature energy as well as all life forms besides the trees." Tsunade leaned back and nodded, sighing once more, dismissed. The two demons and the ninja bowed and swiftly exited the room. With Shizune, her secretary, by her side, she was by herself now as she contemplated through the window. "All right. Either Naruto is right and Shishi is under a possession, or he has gone completely insane and fled. Not everything is looking good. Furthermore, it appears that the Uchiha boy escaped and ended up somewhere unknown. It seems unlikely that he will make it to Orochimaru, but it's still too early to draw conclusions." She closed her eyes for a moment and sighed wearily. "I have the impression that things will only get worse from here on out." Water splashed against his face as he looked up to stare at his mirror. He scowled and closed his eyes, sensing that his Yuki was stirring more than usual inside him. "A kidney, most of the intestine, and the bottom of my lung. No doubt, it started from the seal and it's spreading." Naruto had been feeling himself slowly fade, almost, as if his own Yuki was replacing his insides, somehow ensuring that the rest of his organs continued to function with pure Yuki alone. In addition, he was growing more and more hungry. He had tried eating a little more than usual, but it didn't seem to be helping. Things weren't looking good for him thus far. A pair of arms encircled his waist from behind, whispering, "Naruto. Who, N." Akio stood behind him, tucking her neck into him with a small smile on her face. "What's wrong?" "My Yuki has been acting up a bit," he said with a sigh and a small smile. "It's all right. Nothing unfavorable that I can see thus far." He was forced to turn around by Akio, who gave him a startled expression when he met her severe gaze. "I've known you since you were 7, So I know when you lie, she said. Everything is contained in your smile. Her hands shot out and grabbed his shirt, glaring at him, though he could see her lip tremble as she whispered. Please. Keep your distance from me. Seeing you withdraw yourself hurts. You're not alone in this world. You're not a child anymore. You need not run away from any of us. We cherish you. He sighed again after giving her a brief glance. He had been doing that a lot lately. I think my own Yuki is eating me, he said. Though it's not hurting, I feel void. As if I'm overlooking something significant. Most of the time, I can ignore it, but it is becoming more potent. It desires to consume, or something similar. Furthermore, I'm not sure how to feel about any of this. He was interrupted as Akio threw her arms around him, her shoulders shaking. I wonder how long I have before, he said, putting his own arms around her and slowly massaging her back. What is going on? Maybe this is exactly what's happening, if his organs were truly being replaced, she whispered, clinging to him and encircling him with her tails as if he might vanish at any moment. At this point, we have answers. He looked determined, saying, we have our problem, so now we have to find out everything we can on it. I'm not going to let this, whatever it is, get the best of me. I'm going to fix it. He grinned slightly and turned to face Akio. Come on, it's time to see the rest. A little relaxation would be nice. It was her day off, and it seemed that she was more than willing to just relax for the day. He found himself between Anko's legs, her thighs below either of his arms. Akio to his left, resting her head on his shoulder. Hinata to his right, with her head resting on his lap, and finally Gaia, who was more than happy to snuggle into his chest and roll into a ball. Not a bad way to spend the day, but he was slowly losing feeling on everything below his neck. Something has to be wrong. Foxy. Boy, you're not uncomfortable? Asked Anko, her hand making circles on his chest while she pressed her chest together, her globes smushing his face a bit. He blinked once before his face turned a bit red. Oh? Is tiny Naru-chan ashamed? The purple-haired woman cooed, making sure to rub her boobs together even more as she smiled broadly. Naruto was starting to get steam out of his ears from the boiling blood in his head. Anko-chan, I don't know what you're doing, It sounded a lot like shishi. A small voice in his head telling him to shut up and enjoy the moment, he stammered. The doorbell rang just then, and Naruto, who thanked Kami several times, covered himself with a pillow nearby and ran for the door, trying not to pay attention to the cries of sadness as the girls' foundation Ahima left them, causing them to collapse onto one another. When he finally reached the door, he opened it to find himself staring at empty air, confused, looking around, realizing that there were no chakra signatures anywhere, same as for Yuki. He looked down and saw what appeared to be a scroll, though the paper seemed strange. He nearly dropped it when he picked it up, almost dropping it. Opening it, he read the words before his eyes widened and he turned back to the house. I'm going to see Tsunade-sama and will be returning shortly, he yelled, then vanished in an instant, oblivious to the fact that the shadows surrounding his home started to quiver as if they were giggling. Tsunade glanced down at the piece of paper with a copy of the message written on it. The scroll was next to her, giving her an unsettling feeling, mainly because she had discovered the material used in place of paper: skin. Human skin had been torn off of someone, probably while they were still alive, and afterwards transformed into a scroll. The message itself was equally terrifying, mainly because the characters were always changing and acting as though they were alive, but she could read it somehow. She didn't need to use her eyes to discern what was written on the paper. Instead, a subconscious force communicated to her what was written there. Jinchuriki, I'm waiting for you. I own something that you possess. Recognize that you have options. You can choose to ignore this and carry on as if nothing had occurred. You could also come fight with me, since it won't really matter in the end. I'll have my Bahu here, and you'll pass away. You've got 2 years. By then, you'll either have built up your fighting strength or completed your list in the bucket, as you put it. Speak with your demons if you want to battle me in the end in the hopes of surviving. They are aware of what is taking place. Have fun, since the conflict is about to start. She raised her gaze to Naruto, noting his composure but also his apparent silent rage. Naruto, is there something you know? She put her hands together in front of her and asked. More of a theory, he complained, glaring at the skin-covered scroll. I have a suspicion that this could be caused by the entity that possessed Shishi. I have nothing to support this other than my gut, he complained, a little irritated that he was stating this because it was more of a gut instinct after all. His instincts have typically been correct in the past. At that very moment, the secretary opened the door, leaving the poor man looking extremely scared. This is where Gaia.san is. Squeaking out, he opened the door to reveal Gaia standing behind him, her expression solemn as she raised a scroll identical to the one on the Hokage's desk. Naruto. He picked up his own scroll and mumbled, "Yeah. Me too." The two Jinchuriki turned to face Tsunade, looking uncomfortable. It's possible that the other Jinchuriki got similar messages. What now? With a disturbed expression on her face, Gaia stepped forward and stated, "It can't be a joke." She addressed Naruto directly and remarked, "Moth. Shukaku has been whimpering. He's scared." Naruto. What is going on? He crossed his arms and shook his head, glaring at the lowering sun with a frown on his face. He felt cold, for some reason, from the light of the sun. Just a feeling of dread. At that moment, Jiraiya materialized directly outside the window, entering through it with ease as though he had done so his entire life. As Tsunade was aware, he did. He was the only one who could easily enter through any window, even when they were genin. The serious demeanor of the group caused him to pause. "Great. Now I can't start off with a joke," he grumbled, hoping for a chuckle. Rather, Naruto flung the scroll at him. The Sannin read its contents with ease, scowling when he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him and the characters continued to shift and warp. He shook his head and said, "What the?" before deciding to attack. After reading the message, he raised an eyebrow at Tsunade. He nodded and said, "Does this mean we should get going?" Tsunade looked at Gaia and replied, "Gaia.san, I'm going to have to ask you to leave for now. I promise to explain later, but the three of us need to talk in private." Reluctantly, the Suna Nin turned to face Naruto, a worried expression on her usually expressionless face. With a supportive smile, he nodded to her and extended his hand to give hers a gentle squeeze. She gave a nod before turning to leave the room and shutting the door. Naruto turned to face the toad. Sage and arched an eyebrow. Naruto said, "So, where are you going now?" With Tsunade nodding, Jiraiya announced, "We are going on a training trip." Then he gave Naruto a thumbs up and exclaimed, "That means you and me, boyo." Jiraiya's face started to deteriorate slowly as the said Jinchuriki just gave him a cold, unblinking stare. "Listen, I know I didn't exactly impress you, but I'm a Sannin, as well as your father's sensei. I can teach you many things like taijutsu and some more advanced fuinjutsu, while also polishing a few more of your abilities. I know I'm not the person you want to be with at the moment, but believe me, things are beginning to get bad. The akatsuki are on the move, and that means that you're going to have to get stronger," Jiraiya explained as he gave Naruto serious expression. The teenager stood for a while, taking everything in. The scroll said he had 2 years, and he had to use that time to prepare himself as much as possible for whatever was coming. "How long will we be out?" he asked himself. Naruto knew right then and there what he would decide, about 1.5 years. There was a celebration going on in a small town. Because it was a small town, everyone was celebrating the mayor's daughter's wedding. Fireworks, puppet shows, food, and games were all present. People were cheering, singing, and smiling, and they were either drinking or clapping. It was a very happy time. One individual in particular created an uneasy atmosphere just by strolling around. In other words, anyone who drew too near felt uneasy. The man, who appeared to be in his mid-20s, complained, "Oh man, I hate being here." He was dressed in silky, smooth robes that reached his elbows and beyond, and he had red wooden clogs on his feet. His skin was a nice tan color, and he had long red hair that spiked up at the top. In addition to being quite attractive, he had a scar that extended from his forehead above his eye to just above his mouth. In a strange way, that enhanced his appeal. His expression of disgust was the only thing that seemed off. He detested people. Really. Just to stop himself from going all out and burning everything in sight required a great deal of self-control. Not right now. I have work to do first, he thought, bowing his head and inhaling deeply. His blood-red eyes glowed like hellfire in the shadow his hair cast, opening his senses. I can't let her be taken. I've failed her once. I won't do it twice. He kept walking, attempting to pass the crowd as swiftly as smoothly as he could. It resembled witnessing a red mist being carried by the wind through a forest, disappearing from view before anyone could get a good look. At last, he discovered what he was searching for. A temple. As he approached it, he noticed that it was quite near a sizable lake. Upon seeing the thin layer of yuki on the surface, he narrowed his eyes. The humans will benefit from that. In fact, they will live far longer as a result. That moron, who's always trying to save the poor monkeys. Still, even though I despise them, this is more crucial. If I don't succeed, there won't be anyone to be angry at. And no me to do the hating. He turned around and went in the direction of the lake. He took a moment to look down at the surface before waving his hand back. Behind him, a thin wall of yuki extended and then vanished. Come on out. I know you're not asleep, turtle, and I know for a fact that you're not dead. You took care of your container a long time ago, he exclaimed, crossing his arms over his chest. Can't have anyone else know about this. He had to wait a moment for the water to start bubbling and shifting before a spike protruded. 3 enormous tails emerged from the water, followed by a few others. Spikes covered the entire collar of the beast as a massive, dome-shaped shell suddenly materialized. At last, the head emerged, revealing a solitary eye with a yellow iris and a red sclera that had rings extending from the iris. The creature's belly was a deep red color, and its entire body was a gray-green color with a mass of spikes covering its other eye. It appeared to stare at the man bewildered for a while before realizing what was going on and gasping. The giant turtle said, his deep baritone voice trembling the air, Kurama. What do you want? I haven't seen you since you gave up your title of Kyuubi to that little kid you call a sister. The man growled as his face briefly went hazy before clearing up to reveal 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek. Watch your tongue. I know Hikari doesn't have as much blood lust as the rest of the Kyuubi before her, but she's still a good girl. I don't want to hear you speak ill of her. He spoke to the Sanbi in a serious tone, narrowing his eyes and saying, I'm not here to make small talk, though. The king is stirring. And so far, we're both the only ones that can really be considered able at the moment. Are you in, Isobu? The enormous turtle was silent for a moment before nodding. Fine. Am I to assume that we're going to be looking for the rest of the pack? Kurama nodded and turned to walk away, watching as the enormous turtle shrank to a much smaller size and briefly glowed green. As the light faded, a man in his 20s emerged, his wild black hair spiking from his head, an eye patch featuring a wave symbol covering his right eye. He was dressed in black pants and black boots, a green poncho that hung below his chest, and bandages over most of his abdomen. His arms were also covered in bandages, with the exception of his fingers. In the end, his eye had a rich green hue. Kurama looked back at the water and shook his head, murmuring, I'm never going to understand why you always like being around humans. Or why you like helping them. You know, just cause a few of the humans are dicks doesn't mean every single one of them is. Some of them are actually pretty nice. Isobu said with his arms raised. A smile spread across his face as he raised an eyebrow. Besides, you're just upset I can bed more girls than you can. Kurama said, rolling his eyes, yes, Isobu. I am terribly jealous you can sleep with so many hairless apes. Isobu followed suit, and the 3-tailed beast laughed heartily. Isobu muttered, grinning, I love it when we have a family reunion, as he and his brother started to leave the village with a joyful spring in their steps. Now, let's see what the world has to offer. He was a little fascinated. Thus far, everything experienced here has been akin to what the greatest among us could have ever known. The power, the weapons, the illusions. Everything appeared to be beyond what is possible for humans. Furthermore, they were also not human. Well, with the exception of this specific one. He glanced at the girl tasked with keeping him company and ensuring he never got lost. She had wavy reddish brown hair that reached her shoulders, chocolate brown eyes, and lovely tan skin. She was actually pretty cute. So far, her attire is the only peculiar aspect about her. All she had on was a baggy green sweater with a face on the hood, black gloves, a pair of green boots that reached her thighs, and tan short shorts, which she seemed to want to keep on despite the fact that the hallways were getting kind of dark. The features on the hood were quite blocky and eerie, giving the appearance of a sad or disappointed face. Actually, the girl was pretty quiet. She typically only spoke when someone spoke to her, but every time she did, she mumbled and stammered and was just plain annoying. Reminded him of the weakling Hyuga. He sighed and kept walking, the girl twitching and running after him. He knew why she'd suddenly become rigged. He sensed it too. A thought struck him and he straightened up as if a wave had just passed through the hallways. Something he knew was not his own thought. Required in the royal chamber. The girl shrieked, "You, my lord? We are needed inth. The throne room." He turned to face her, glaring at her with his cold black eyes. He growled and ignored her as she started to apologize profusely, bowing and putting her hands together. "I know that. I felt it too," she said. He could almost swear she was getting tears in her eyes. "To be honest, I think the girls were worse than the Hyuga." He growled, "Enough. Let's just go." As he observed her sniff, nod, turn, and beckon him to follow. In less than 10 minutes, they found themselves in the throne room, where the king sat with a faint smile on his face. That smile didn't appeal to him. Primarily because it was visible on his face. That fucking dog had such an annoying face, which he knew for sure. Feeling a little irritated, he gave the king a glare and the man just laughed at him. The king stated, "Hello, boy. I hope that your caretaker has been of use to you. I wouldn't want you to be upset at her uselessness." The poor girl appeared even more pitiful as she paled and looked at the ground, almost like a small rabbit who didn't want to look at the impending doom. The poor girl started to tremble and her eyes started to get wet as if there was a pressure building over the room. She experienced a slow, excruciating sense of impending death. She was unable to move, breathe, and she was fairly certain that her heart had stopped functioning. The boy, a little rattled by the pressure, hissed, "She's fine. I have no problem with her." He knew that pressure was unfathomable, even though he didn't really care for the girl. He really didn't want to know what the king would do to her. Since she wasn't terrible company, he also didn't want it to happen to her. The pressure eased as soon as he heard his response, and the king grinned almost kindly. He turned to face the boy and grinned, asking, "How is your shoulder, boy?" "Good. Then she won't have to be replaced, yet." After giving his shoulder a quick rub, the boy said, "It's sore, but I feel better." He then said, almost grudgingly, "Thanks." He said, "No need. I see potential in you. It would be foolish of me to leave you with that worm." The boy had never heard a more hilarious or cruel last word. The monarch was utterly cut off from everything. It didn't feel hate or love. It was unable to. It didn't care about the suffering or the scars he left behind. It just enjoyed playing with things. His sole goal was to satisfy his own hunger. He glared at the king and growled, "Do you need me for something?" With a smile, the demon crossed one leg over the other. "I have a offer, I guess you could say. I can make you more powerful than you already are, taking away all of your human weaknesses. You'll transcend all of them, becoming a god in their eyes." His grin was menacing. "Of course, if you refuse, it won't really stop me from making you stronger. You'll still be human, but let's just say that that status will only drag you down. Interested?" He shot it down right away. He did desire power, but he also preferred being a human. Increased the quality of life by valuable. "No thanks. I'm fine." The monarch merely shrugged. He'd have less work to do and more time to get ready for the impending war. The boy turned to leave, and the king waved his hand, grinning, saying, "Fine then, you may leave. It's getting rather late. Delightful dreams, Sasuke-san." This won't end well, Naruto thought, fidgeting a little as he stared at the door. It's funny how he was happy when he first saw this door, and now he was scared more than he would be if he had to go without ramen for a week. Sighing, he decided that he would have to accept the situation and hope for the best. Oh well, he had a good run. He opened the door, took a step inside, listened, and noticed that there was conversation taking place in the living room. Taking a deep breath, he entered the room and said, smiling as best he could, cringing a little at the girl's stern looks. Heck, even sweet Hinata was giving him a look that would make Hiyashi proud. Naruto.kun. What's the matter? He hated seeing them worry like this, so he sighed and decided to be direct. Asked Akio, a worried look that was extremely painful to look at. I must depart for a considerable amount of time. When he saw the girls fighting, he began, holding up a hand, about 1.5 years, maybe longer. It's for a good cause. When his eyes met Gaia's, she nodded, telling him that they needed to know. Me and Gaia have been challenged, I suppose. Not just the Akatsuki, but something else is pursuing us. Something significant. This thing has taken shishi, whatever it is. Although I'm not sure how or why, I do know that Shishi is having problems, and it is our duty as his family to support him however we can. I'm going on a training trip with Jiraiya because of this. He clarified, I'll be back as soon as I can. I promise. Now he waited for their responses. The first person to speak was Anko. You mean only a year and a half? She asked, looking into his eyes to make sure he wasn't lying. He nodded, getting her to sigh while rubbing her temples. I don't like it, but go ahead and do what you believe is right. I'll try my best to help the other girls in the interim, she said with a startled smile, and it looks like Tsunade Sama made a deal with Sakura. Pinky is going to be the apprentice of our beloved Hokage, right now. With a nod, Naruto turned to face the other girls and watched as Akio approached him, wrapping her arms around him and inhaling his scent as she did so. All right. I know you'll come back stronger than ever, but in the meantime, I'll be helping Auntie with her research and getting ready for whatever it is we're up against, she said, planting a kiss on his cheek. I'll work out too, I said, smiling foxily at her partner. Naruto grinned and rubbed her cheek, both of them purring happily for a moment before he felt two more pairs of arms encircle him. He saw that Gaia and Hinata were hugging him, with Gaia appearing to be in pain and Hinata wearing a sorrowful expression. I desire that you stay. He sighed and patted their heads, and the two girls tightened their hold on him. So badly, murmured Gaia, refusing to let him see her face. She was always strong, always in control, but her heart hurt and she wanted nothing more than to keep her precious fox close to her. Hinata was also saddened. She had finally had the chance to be with him, to talk to him, to learn more about him than ever before, and now he was leaving. Yes, he would return, but it hurt to think that I would be unable to see his sparkling eyes, his smiling face. Believe me, I also don't want to leave you girls, but this has to be done. I'm counting on you girls to be strong, the two girls said, but they wouldn't let him go. Eventually, Akio and Anko joined in, and the girls smothered him with their bodies in a way that was both consoling and oppressive. After they separated, Naruto gestured quickly, and 4 Narutos appeared in the room at once. They didn't waste any time in grabbing a girl and giving her as passionate a kiss as he could manage. For the remainder of the day, the room was filled with moans, as Naruto spent time cuddling and kissing his girls while sending another Shadow Clone to pack his belongings. Said Shadow Clone complained that he didn't get any of the action. Here he was at Konoha's gates, prepared to depart, while Jiraiya stood by him, inhaling deeply. Take one last look, Naruto. Because it will be a long time before we return to this location. And if you'd like, I can treat you to some ramen when we do return. It sounded like a nice thing to say, but it felt like he just killed his own wallet in an almost violent and inhuman way. It didn't help that Naruto's eyes seemed to glint almost evilly. Only when we come back though. Jiraiya regretted that very instant he said it. Taking one last glance, Naruto turned away and started to walk. This time, he said, please wait for me, ladies. I promise to hurry back. And you wait for me too, Shishi. I won't let anything happen to my family. Both men set off on their journey, and as the rest of their friends started training behind them in the hopes of becoming stronger, Naruto knew he had left Konoha in good hands.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.